Good evening. Today is January 5th, and this is the Planning Board meeting. And today we'll be discussing the continuation of site plan modification for the Rail Transit District. It is currently 7:20. First item, is anyone taping the Planning Board meeting today? Is anybody taping it?
Besides us.
Besides us? So, all right. Just want to get that out. We had some housekeeping. We have one meeting for Vanessa to catch up on and watch. You've not watched it yet, right? And John? You're up to date, right?
I should be up to date,
You're up
yeah.
to date,
Unless you
okay.
guys did
So the last
something I
meeting, we
didn't
did
know
no deliberation.
You are supposed to announce that we're recording.
That we are being recorded?
Yeah.
Yes. By WACA.
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Announcements?
Go for it, Karen.
Okay, great. I was just going to give a quick overview for anyone in the audience or watching at home where we are on our Rail Transit District project that we have up on the agenda tonight. So this is the fourth meeting that we've had on the RTD. However, as Mike just mentioned, our last meeting was not an official meeting. It was strictly informational and ministerial. We didn't have enough planning board members who were eligible to vote on the project present at our last meeting on December the 10th. So this is the third official meeting, and we do have all of our planning board members here tonight. So we will continue with the site plan modification discussion. We also have our peer reviewer, Tom Houston, here from PSC with us. We have received a peer review. The applicant has responded to the peer review, and we received comments back from Tom today. And we will invite him later on to review those with us. But we'll begin and invite Lloyd to give us updates on the application.
Great, thank you, Karen. For the record, my name is Lloyd Geisinger, the president of Thorndike Development. We've got a full team here tonight in the hopes that we can answer whatever questions the board may have effectively. Dan DeMarco and Steve Murphy in the back hiding from Campanelli Partners. And then Dan Holmes, our general counsel, and Dave Eastridge, my partner at Thorndike, and David Mackwell, our civil engineer. I think, if I may, I'd like to just sketch out, Nat, what I understand to be the agenda tonight. Maybe you and Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, we have a few new slides that we'd like to show you, very brief.
Sure,
won't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. I know that Dave Mackwell had an opportunity to go through Tom's second peer review letter, and Tom, thank you very much for getting that done over the holidays. That was really above and beyond. So I'm sure we want to go through that as well, and go through that point by point. We have a few issues that I've communicated with the board in advance to give people an opportunity to think about issues I know we're going to want to talk about this evening. We can get into those as a package. And Lisa, did you intend to go through the draft decision?
I think that we would start, depending on where we are as far as the chair is concerned, we would start and go through point by point.
Okay. So would you think that would be the last item on the agenda?
That would be last after you do
Right,
the
so,
presentation in these items.
Okay, does that work for you, Mike?
It works for me.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, so let me just run through a couple of slides. We have continued to be very busy since we were here last. We have actually updated our landscape plan, I should say our site plan, and have completed our landscape plan, which we will be filing with the board officially in the morning, as well as sending Tom a copy. This is a rendered version of the landscape plan, so even though, although the colors seem a little bit off, I'm not quite sure why, but while this is a rendered plan, this is an accurate landscape plan as we intend to build it. So in other words, these circles represent street tree locations as they appear on the construction documents that we'll be filing tomorrow. And there are, along with this, several important adjustments that we've made. Specifically down in the bottom left corner, we have added a tot lot in a location that we think works quite well, so that it's a little bit out of the way but still very accessible. It's a good sized piece of property there that would allow kids to both run around in a controlled environment as well as having some play equipment. And we've also added a fenced-in dog park also a little bit out of the way, but accessible as well. So those are two material changes from the previous plan, and in incorporating those into the site plan, there were some very minor adjustments to buildings that you wouldn't even be able to pick up unless you overlaid them. This building moved a couple of feet towards the bottom, nothing that affects any of the engineering of the project. We've also now designed the central green area, so this is a specific layout. As you can see, it has a pool area, it has hardscapes that work off of the clubhouse. If any of you have made the journey down to our Norwood project, this is really a very similar configuration to what we have in Norwood. And then we have the green space, which is designed as a bowl feeding back to the main building, where we would hope to have Friday night outdoor movies and things like that to encourage the whole sense of community. Additional changes that we've made at the request of the fire chief: we have changed the entry road to a divided median so that there are two dedicated separate lanes, which and in the median we've shown flowering trees as well. And obviously that is in the intent that if there is a blockage on one side, the fire department can still access on the other side. So that was the other material change that occurred. Am I missing anything, Dave? Okay, so those are the changes that we've made to the plan. And as we had talked about previously, we will be filing revised civil plans later this week that reflect these changes, which we hope will be the plans of record once Tom has an opportunity to review them and we incorporate whatever changes we need to make. This is an accurate rendering of the building taken from our construction documents using SketchUp model. If any of you are familiar with that, it's a computerized three-dimensional modeling system that we've talked about before. Obviously very, very similar to what you've seen, but this is the actual building, really to the inch. And as we have mentioned, for a variety of reasons, we are now proposing, or planning I should say, to build this with hardy plank, fiber cement, and we've increased the amount of face brick at the lower level. And the design review committee, who we met with last night, I can tell you is very pleased with that change. So that is the current configuration. We also have a view from the four-story side on the rear, which from the previous plan, again, we've increased the amount of brick to full height on the first level. The rear has full decks that you can actually access, and on the front we have these Juliet balconies, as we've talked about before. Just because we prepared this for the design review committee, for those of you interested in terms of the materials, these panels that help to differentiate the sections of the building are hardy plank fiber cement panels. The windows are Energy Star rated, the brick veneer, and then this is PVC, not pine, as trim. All of the PVC, all of the trim, I should say, that's shown on the building is PVC for easier maintenance. We've also included, I'm not going to spend any time on this, but just so you know, we'll also be filing with you tomorrow a lighting plan for the site, which was one of the items that had not been previously submitted. And while you can't see it on this plan, there are little dots along the way showing where the lights are. And this is the light fixture, which is dark sky compliant, that we're planning on using in the community. Again, this is actually, I'm just really have it up here to point out that we now have it. This is the final landscape plan that has a detailed plant list, which we forwarded to the design review committee this morning, and shows the tree locations and all the walkways and, again, the plant materials classified by small, medium, and large plant. We have a grading plan that is the same as you've seen before. I just have it up here for, in case we want to go back to it. So those are the additional pieces of information that we have for the board this evening. I'll stop here for a minute. If people have any questions, we can certainly come back to it also. Okay,
Continue, yep.
great. At this point, does it make sense to get into Tom's peer review, or?
Yeah, Lloyd, I think if you think you've finished
Yep.
with your presentation, then Tom, if you would kindly go through the crux of your peer review, that would be great. Please.
Pleased to do so.
Okay. Do you want me to change the slide, or?
No, I just was gonna speak into the microphone,
Oh.
so I don't want to disturb your,
Okay.
thank you. Yep. Thank you, Nat. For the record, Tom Houston from PSC, Professional Services Corporation, the board's peer reviewer. We had originally issued our peer review report back in November. The applicant provided some very detailed answers to us in mid-December, and we have just gone through their answers, and I think if I summarize briefly, we've made very substantial progress in resolving many of the issues that were identified in the peer review. Many of the remaining issues are sort of tidying up, things that the applicant agreed to but may not have made it onto the drawings, just documenting some of the changes. There are a few issues still outstanding, but we have addressed the vast majority of them. Our comment one and many other comments in the peer review relate to issues that will be resolved upon submission of the landscape plan, which, as was just indicated, will be submitted tomorrow. Our comment three relates to the emergency access, and that is kind of a substantial issue. The applicant on their part has indicated that they will continue to provide the emergency access currently indicated on the drawings, or will explore other options. And to throw my 2 cents in, it seems to make every bit of sense to me to have an emergency access through the rail station parking lot. I actually brought in a couple of photographs that I think Nat has, but there's already a road there. It's steep for a distance of about 200 feet or so. If you improve that, and you can do that simply by extending that slope a little bit into the railroad station parking lot, unfortunately in that area, there are no active spaces anyway. So you can sort of solve the grading problem with fairly minimal effort. That would mean that the emergency access for the site would be down the MBTA access road and through the rail station. If we go, excuse me, if we go that way, I would suggest that maybe we have a supplemental secondary driveway somewhere along the site frontage. I talked to the design engineer about that, and he had suggested perhaps a location in the lower right-hand corner of the plan as you are looking at it. Oh, yeah, thank you. Oh, excellent.
Yeah, just press that button.
Oh,
There you go.
there we go. Yeah, right at about that area there would be a good place from a grading point of view to put the secondary emergency driveway, which would work in conjunction with the emergency access through the railroad parking area. Comment number 4, the applicant has a balanced site. We're just seeking some documentation of that. Comment 5, construction timetable. We think that can be handled during the construction phase. Traffic issue, there's a number of comments here, 6 through 10, 11, 12 or so. They relate to aspects of the site plan which don't completely comply with the planning board's rules and regs. We view the planning board's rules and regs as sort of construction guidelines for a community, even though this is not a subdivision. So we had commented in item 6, comment 6, that the centerline radius of the road doesn't comply with the standards of the subdivision regulations. The applicant indicated they would like relief from that, and we think that's okay. That would mean that you would have a radius along the center roadway there, which is a bit less than you'd have for a comparable subdivision street. But given the fact that this is sort of a community and people shouldn't be driving too fast through there anyway, we think that waiver of centerline radius is fine. 8 and 9 are further waivers we don't take exception to. Getting down to number 9, the subdivision regs require vertical granite curbing on steeply sloped portions of roadways. The idea is twofold. Number one, it provides additional vehicle control. It's harder for a vehicle to mount a vertical granite curbing, and it provides for better control of stormwater runoff, which gets going pretty fast down a steeply sloped area. That is one thing the applicant has asked for relief on. We do not concur with that request for relief. Although it's not absolutely critical, but in our judgment, I think the vertical curbing provides for better control of vehicles and runoff. Similarly, they had asked to waive throat stones on the catch basins. Throat stones, in case anyone doesn't know, is sort of an arched opening at the back of the catch basin cut into the curb, which substantially increases the capacity, the inlet capacity of the catch basin. And it's also something that's pretty hard to plug up, so if you get leaf cover in the fall or whatever, it's difficult to block this throat stone. The applicant had asked for relief from that. That's not something that we would recommend, but again, it's not a really critical issue. Comment 12, there are some curb stops shown. We think those are kind of problematic, but also we recognize this is a private site, and if the applicant wants to deal with the difficulties of plowing around them and things, that may be something that the board might want to allow. Skipping to comment 15, we had raised initially some issues about down gradient off-site capacity, and there are some culverts apparently that in a prior drainage analysis for the prior project on the site, there was an indication that there needed to be some work on these culverts. There was, however, a prior agreement on the previous project that the applicant would pay $114,000 towards the town doing that work, and the applicant indicates that they are willing to honor that prior agreement.
I have to interject there. I'm sorry, there was a miscommunication there. That is not correct. We are not prepared to include that, and we can talk about that as an item.
Okay, my misunderstanding of statements made at the prior hearing.
No, I think it was our misunderstanding. No, your fault.
Okay. Okay, skipping to number 17. This may or may not be an issue, but the applicant has requested a waiver of compliance with the zoning bylaws requirement to have no increase in the volume of runoff from the site. They do match peak rates, but the volume of runoff is a more conservative standard used in some communities and not others. That is the town's requirement, and I'm not sure we fully have our hands around that issue in terms of what would be required to meet that standard. The applicant has indicated, I think it's the primary justification for requesting that waiver, that it was granted for the prior project. But I don't know right now what you'd have to do to meet that standard. So I think that may be something that requires some additional discussion. Many of the remaining issues have been solved. Skipping to comment 29, we had a request to do a couple of changes to the O&M plan, the operation and maintenance plan. A revised plan was not submitted, and similarly with comment 31, we were looking for a minor change to the construction period stormwater pollution prevention plan. That revised plan was not submitted. In comment 34, we think it is appropriate to delay submission of the SWPPP to the construction phase. And again, several things that are just sort of documenting and tying things up to make sure there are no loose ends. For example, comment number 38, the applicant indicated that there would be post office boxes in the lobbies of the building. We just wanted some documentation that the postmaster was in agreement with that. Comment 39, and there are some other comments in here. The applicant has agreed to provide a peer review, or to pay for a peer review consultant to evaluate the concerns of the fire department. And we just wanted some documentation to make sure that all of the fire department's peer review comments have in fact been incorporated in the drawings. Be something as simple as an email from the fire chief. Comment number 40, few of the driveways in the site that don't have parking spaces along them, we thought it appropriate to sign them for no parking. The applicant had agreed, but we think those signs could be added to the drawing now. That's a de minimis work effort. We think that it should be done at this point. Similarly, on comment number 44, with an agreement to add some regulatory signs, we think they might as well be added to the drawings now. Again, a minimum effort, and you might as well tie up that loose end. Comment number 46, the water distribution system loops through the site, which is in accordance with good engineering practice. One thing I don't think we have, though, is fire flow test data. So the configuration of the system looks fine, but we just want to find out what the pressure and available flow is, particularly on a site with a big grade change across the site. Typically have good flow and pressure on the lower part of the site, but as the grade rises across the site, there could potentially be a problem. So we just want to see some test data to verify that that is not an issue. Few items, 56, 57, changes we've agreed to, they just haven't been added to the drawings yet. In comment 58, this relates to project signage, directional signage, other signage for the project. The applicant would prefer to do that at the building design stage. We do not see a problem with that. Comment number 60, we were looking for information on the site lighting. I'm pleased that is now available. Also pleased to see the dark skies compliant fixtures were selected for the site lighting plan. Comment number 65, we had raised initially our thought that perhaps a site alteration special permit might be required for the site based upon clearing and upon volume of earth. The applicant called our attention to paragraph 5.8.3.1, which is a list of exceptions, and we do believe that the project does qualify for that exception. In retrospect, the exception being clearing of land zoned residential when such a parcel is a submission for development to the planning board. So the project appears to qualify for that exemption. A couple of the following comments resolved with submission of the landscaping plan. 69, we're looking for certification of compliance with the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. Applicant agreed to that, but has not yet been added to the drawings. And again, comment 70 is just tying up the fire department's final concurrence. So I think that's where we are. Again, I think we've made substantial progress with many of the issues, and we'll look forward to reviewing the recently submitted information.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
it. So we have a. Susan? I think that's, before we comment, I'm just gonna turn it over to Lisa to review the 3 decisions.
Wait 1 second. Did you have any response to Tom's comments?
Well, I was going to suggest that there were probably half a dozen items that Tom mentioned that he kind of throws back to the board, you know, for your interpretation and determination. And it might make sense for us to go through those specific ones and talk about them in a little more detail so that we can get some guidance and agreement on how we going to modify the plans or not, depending on the board's position on those matters.
So that would, I think the first one was, first 2 were 9 and 10, the requested waivers for 9 and 10. One was the
curbing.
granite curbing and the throat stones.
Right. So I'm going to start, and then I'll pull in my engineers as we need them. And Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that a good portion of the slopes that are greater than 6% are the transitions from the front of the buildings, the spine road down to the back of the buildings. That was at least our observation. And of course, I managed to not plug this in, so, oh, look at that. Amazing. Let me just get back to the correct plan here. So in Tom's comment about the granite, not exclusively, but we have, with this double-tiered system that we have these connections from the spine road down to the back alley, as we like to call it, here, and it occurs in one other place, over here. And those are more than 6%, is that correct, Dave? Yep. Yeah. Our position on this, first of all, is that these are private roads, privately maintained. We're certainly not going to argue that granite is not a superior product to a vertical Cape Cod berm. For us, it really comes down to where we spend our dollars. But in particular, with the 6% category, these are driveways off of our main road here, connecting to our parking lots. And so I guess, for me at least, it becomes a question of where that line is drawn. So this is a significant cost issue for us, one that we had not figured on, and one that we really would prefer to spend money on other things within the project. It really needs to be a net zero-sum game for us at this point, and where we are responsible for plowing and maintenance and repair as it might come up. We felt this was a reasonable position. I guess I would also say, because we haven't had this conversation yet, we're a little unclear, and while we're very respectful of the position that Tom has taken, using the subdivision rules and regulations as the foundation for reviewing the project, that's sound engineering practice. This is not a subdivision. Those rules and regulations, based on your own town bylaws, do not specifically apply. They're not cross-referenced that I'm aware of as the basis for this this plan. Again, very respectful of using those as a foundation, But that was why we didn't request a waiver, for example, of that issue. We presented the plans that we felt were appropriate and consistent with this type of a community. So that would be our position on the granite, that we feel that it's our chase, it's our cost of repair. It's not as though the town would get saddled with the burden of having to repair deficient curbing that might occur from time to time, which would be a concern with the subdivision roads that the town might take over in the future.
Any comments from the, or concerns from the board members on curbing? Strong opinions?
I'm willing to accept that there are better things to spend the money on in this case.
John, same mindset? Yeah. All right. It's not needed for any stormwater runoff control or anything like that?
We will have curbing. It's not that we
You
won't have
curbing,
curbing.
it's just berm, right. Okay.
Lisa, you seem to have the list.
The next
one
item,
is the throat
throat stone.
stone.
Now, on that one, Tom, you felt if we wanted to do it, you were okay with it? It's just you thought it'd be a problem for plowing? Was that the one? Or am I confusing two of them?
No,
Yes,
this
that's
catch basin issue.
rationale for another issue.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we won't be able to hear you at home, Mike. So
Can take one of these.
That's fine, yeah. The throat stones serve two functions. Number one, they provide just more opening to pass stormwater into each catch basin. Because you have to be able to drive cars and step on catch basin grates, there's not that much of an open area in these catch basin grates, and they often act as the control as to how much runoff can get into the drainage system. The throat stone supplements the grate with a pretty big opening in terms of its area, so it makes sure that the water can get in there. The other thing is, the grate is more prone to blockage just due to maintenance issues. If you get leaves or something else on top of the grate, it'll cut down the capacity. So I do think, and I suggest quite strongly, that you require the throat stones. So.
We're willing to accept that recommendation on the throat stones. I just conferred with our engineer.
Okay.
So we're okay with that one.
Tom may have to help me out with this. I had 15 was the issue regarding the amount of stormwater and the mitigation payment.
On the 100 and, I think it's 111,400.
It's 111 in the JPI.
I'm guilty of calling it 114, so I think I'm the one who.
You want to call it 125?
We can move the decimal point to a couple other places too, but. This is an issue that I think was part of the comments that I sent along, Mike, to you.
Yep. And I did forward them to the other board
Thank you.
members, so they have a
Thank you.
copy, yep.
So, for the benefit of everyone in the room, let me just kind of summarize where we come out on this and our feelings here. As this board is aware, since it's signatory to the agreement, we entered into a development agreement with the town in advance of entering into the site plan modification process. A little bit unusual from my perspective in doing the development agreement before the public review, but that was something that the town, for perfectly valid reasons, felt was important. And that development agreement was negotiated. Lisa was present, Tony Schiavi was present. There were a number of meetings back and forth. And there were a variety of items that were carried forward from the previous permit, specifically all the traffic requirements that had not been completed by JPI that have been added. We were asked during that process to participate in addressing, I guess, what has become a town concern at Olive Street, irrespective of whether our traffic analysis indicated that we would be contributing to that problem. which we agreed to do. And there were a variety of items like that that were all negotiated between the parties. This one was not brought up. This one does not appear in that development agreement. It exists in the same document as other items that were brought forward, but it was not brought forward. And so we feel as though the responses that we gave at the time that we negotiated in good faith were relied on the total dollars that we were committing to this project. From our perspective, the dollars are fungible. You know, if the planning board and the selectmen want to reallocate some of that $1.6 million that we've committed to the town from our side of the ledger, plus the $3.1 million that is coming out of the sale of the purchase of the property, I should say, from the seller's side to the town, we certainly would have no objection to that. But we don't think it's appropriate at this time, and it would be very challenging for us to agree to add another $111,400 to an agreement that's already been put to bed.
So I just want to clarify one thing. The planning board is not a signatory to the development agreement. The planning board is a signatory to the covenant.
Excuse me,
So
I stand corrected. I'm sorry, my mistake.
Some historical context here. There was a lot of negotiation on the original approved plan over the fees, the inspection fees, the mitigation, and all of this. The financial side of it was mostly agreed upon at the time by the selectmen, and I believe this was included in that. The issue is
You're talking about back at the JPI?
Yes, yes. The issue is that downstream of the drainage system, at least as originally planned, and I believe ultimately it all still goes to the same direction, there's a culvert that runs under, I think under Tilton Street, and then out kind of back behind the fire station, behind the library, and finally out to the river. And portions of that are, much of it is smaller than it should be, and portions of it are are unsafe in the event that they may collapse. I mean, it's not in good shape. The total cost of reconstructing the whole thing, I believe the number was over $1 million at the time, and this was what was negotiated as part of the overall development plan last time. So that's sort of where this came from. I don't think the other board members are really familiar with that.
And we're not questioning the validity of the
Right.
of the project.
I don't know that any work was ever done on the culvert.
On Tilton Street?
Well, Tilton Street was repaved. They didn't dig up and replace or repair the culvert underneath it. I may be a little confused as to where exactly it is underground.
But again, we're not questioning the need for the project, nor are we questioning, you know, whether $111,000 is a appropriate contribution or not. Our point is very simple, and that is these financial issues were brought up, negotiated, addressed, and agreed to between the selectmen and us. And there was an opportunity to bring this one up as well. Our commitment and willingness to participate in other items which don't fall under a site plan modification purview were frankly based on the total dollars that we felt we could afford to commit.
I would like to hear from the selectmen or town staff that was involved with the negotiation of that development agreement as to whether they would agree or disagree with your perspective on this.
Well, it's simpler than that. It's not in the agreement. The agreement was to cover all of the financial obligations related to the project, other than the potential that new mitigation items that had not been considered would be brought up. This was not a new mitigation item. This is an item that we've previously known. So the proof is in the document. We negotiated it in good faith. We signed the agreement in good faith. Frankly, we need the town to do the same.
Any thoughts? Want me to, I can come back to this item as we get through some of the other things? This one,
No, I just, I appreciate a lot of, what we're looking at tonight, and I think, they've, again, done some quality improvements. I like that they've followed some of the design reviews guidelines. What I don't like is oftentimes feeling like a lot of this is a done deal before it even hits us. So I think you gotta tread lightly when you get on that path, especially if you're looking, obviously you feel like you have specific rights with a modification, but I believe we're trying to work with you and be fair in the way we interpret some of what's being put in front of us today, even between the engineers. I think there's some specific things that we have to address one by one, but I don't like it being framed where, well, that's already done. That's not really up for discussion tonight with some of these items, which is kind of the direction we're going with this, because there's a lot of give and take in here, and I don't think you want to get into a tit for tat, piece by piece.
And I appreciate you saying that, and I'll try and be more careful in the way I phrase things. However, just John, as you want to make sure that your rights are preserved, and we fully appreciate that. By the same token, we have been involved in this process as well. And when we sit down at a negotiating table with people that we think are authorized and providing us with the package of information that we need, and we sign a document and we're very clear that, this is our ability to pay, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to expect that we can rely on that document. So this is an issue that has come up repeatedly, so I'm repeating myself, but I've said my piece.
And I guess I understand your position and where you're coming from, but that was not with us. So
True.
unfortunately,
Absolutely true.
we're in the position where
You're right.
we have to deal with some of this. So, do you want to go through some of the items, Mike? Or do you want to come back
so,
specifically to?
well, that's, yep, go ahead, you first, Nat.
I really don't think that's.
You have a comment?
Okay.
So I do think it.
Go first.
So in my opinion, I do think it's, and you kind of referenced it, it is tied to a bigger picture of different items and different things that we probably want to talk about in a more holistic way. So I would like to maybe table this particular item, go through the remaining items, and then return to it, and when we we'll address all the items in the email kind of together as one conversation.
Fair enough.
And take it from there.
Good.
So then the next item that's on Tom's list was 17, which regards the volume of runoff.
Yeah, I think that I think Tom is pointing out that we haven't provided documentation as to what it would look like if we were to try and achieve the full volume. From the outset, we reached the same conclusion that the engineers for JPI had reached, which was that this site made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do that. And again, this gets into a little bit, I think, and we're happy to discuss this, but this gets into a little bit as to how we've tried to walk that fine line between an amendment to the existing site plan approval versus a new site plan process. And where we were not asking for a modification to that condition, and where we demonstrated that the impervious cover was less than had previously been approved, it was our feeling that we had met the standard that we needed to meet on that issue. Conversely, if we had more impervious cover and we were potentially aggravating the situation, we would have felt a burden to do more. So I think this one, for us at least, which we identified at the very first meeting, the approach is more as a result of the process that we're following than we certainly understand Tom's position on this.
Just for public information and the history again on this, generally we require that the total volume of runoff from a site not exceed the post-build what it was before build, which means that we get as much groundwater recharge as in the final build as we had before construction began. We did grant a waiver on this when we did the previous site plan, and one of the lines of reasoning for that was not just the nature of the site, but also that we might not want as much groundwater recharge that close to the Nyanza site, that having the ground a little drier might actually help things. And so my inclination is that the waiver is in place with the existing approved plan, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to carry that forward on the new plan. And he is correct that this was brought up when the plan was first presented to us this fall.
Preston, to your knowledge, was any of this tied to the idea that there'd be repairs to the culvert as well with some of the mitigation money, and that was required to handle some of the additional stormwater runoff?
It was part of the reasoning in asking for the mitigation, I believe. Because if there wasn't any increase, then the drainage system is purely town infrastructure, and if there's a problem with town infrastructure that happens to be used by the site, that would normally be the town's concern, not the site's concern. But with the volumetric increase, that kind of pulled that into play, I believe, was the reasoning in asking for that previously.
Okay. And if we confirm that it hasn't been brought up to an acceptable standard, I mean, it predates me and most of the board. I don't know if that's something you can just follow up with David to just kind of see.
I'm pretty sure there's been no work
done. Okay.
on that culvert.
Okay.
I remember at one point they were, they had somebody going in to film it, and the fire chief said, "Oh, you can't go into that section." Just from what they could see of it heading into that, they wouldn't let a workman with a helmet and everything even crawl into it. So too afraid of something collapsing on the ceiling.
But that could have been an off-site mitigation with Tilden.
I don't remember which sections of the culvert were in the worst disrepair, and I know most of it they thought wasn't as large as it should have been, and some of that is periodically leads to flooding at the fire station and other problems. So it's something that should be fixed regardless of this project.
Any of the board members have concerns
With that specifically?
with that specifically?
I think we might want to find out if it is tied to that, to the mitigation funds with the increase for that culvert.
I mean, it doesn't appear our engineer picked that up as far as anything related to this specific site. I think so this may in fact not be linked to this project as far as that goes. And I understand where they're coming from as far as a total package related to the complete street, the whole grant and everything goes with that. My point before was not specific to this culvert. My point was just towards the feeling of being locked into something where we can't even talk about it now.
Yeah.
So there's other things I think we have to address that are coming up.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to, because I want to close out this issue regarding the volume. So Preston's issue was that the waiver was granted before, and he gave the reasons for the waiver on the volume. And I'm not talking about the mitigation issue, but the separate issue, the waiver of the volume. And I think he just said that he's fine
He's fine.
with it again, and so I just want to kind of close that particular item out.
Yeah, that's, I think, the one we were still just
Okay.
talking to. We weren't going back to the mitigation one yet. I think you had asked to see if they were tied together, but
If there's gonna be increased runoff that's gonna use that culvert, maybe, I mean, it would make sense that that might have been the reason for it. If it is, then I think it's connected. If it's not, then it's not connected.
yeah, I asked the question just to give context to why the money was granted. Not
There
so
were
much that-
discussions with it being connected at the time.
And that,
We identified that issue in looking at the drainage computations for the original site. They happen to have been done by an engineer that I know, Bob Crucial, who's very qualified, very meticulous. And he identified that there was a capacity constraint in that culvert and recommended replacing it. That was the original context that we raised the issue. And then at the meeting, I heard of this agreement, and I thought on that basis that if an agreement was made, that sort of put that issue to bed. But physically, there are constraints in that culvert. The current modeling doesn't address that in detail. The modeling for the prior much larger site did, and there was an increase there, which is why Bob identified it as something to be upgraded. So.
Is anything being picked up in the upgrades they're doing to the street now that makes this a moot point? We don't know.
I don't know. That's why I kinda asked that.
Talk to David.
That's why I asked
Yeah.
to talk to David and kinda to see the, before we
Okay,
grant the waiver.
All right.
We should just know
Yeah, we just want to obviously make sure we're not creating a drainage issue.
It sounds like we had very good reason to want to maybe reduce the saturation at the top of the development, so that may still be a desire of the town, but I just would like to get
I'll speak to
Manugian's opinion.
All right.
Sorry, I missed the first part of what you said there, Mike.
So we wanna still talk to David to make sure this is still the direction that the town, wants to go in. And, there may be very good reason that we're trying to draw water away from the site. So it may be we just honor the waiver as is, and know that there is, repairs that need to be made upstream, for lack of a better word, in the very near future. But I think, engaging the DPW director on this and getting his input to make sure, he's fully aware of the situation is just important before we close out that item.
So that's the question. Is there a constraint at that culvert? Does this project create a problem? And is it being addressed with the street upgrades that would happen along with this project?
Can you, I don't know if you can answer this question, or you can answer this question. What's the reduction
That's what I was
in
gonna.
runoff? Even if it exceeds the volume, what's the reduction from the JPI
Where?
proposed runoff?
Just wrote that. New calc.
Good evening, David Mackel with Kelly Engineering Group. It's a great question, but, going back to where we started with this project and some of the benefits of, there's a lot less development with this project. We have to remember that the JPI project was also incorporated, I believe, the stormwater reports incorporated clearing land on both sides of the street, significant stormwater management ponds that also incorporated another 190 unit development and other build out on the property. So we're on one piece where the other analysis did the whole park. So it's a little bit, not apples to apples, so to speak, but we can certainly parse through their report and provide what we think is the equivalent answers. But the fact that this particular project is so much smaller, the numbers that we would provide was gonna show it as a little bit less. But, it's a difficult one, but we can certainly pick through and try to give you the best equivalent answer we can.
And not being expert, I mean, I'm of the mindset that a quick new calculation probably would be valuable. I wanna make sure we don't grant a waiver and end up having to do $2 million in repairs in 6 months from now, as soon as construction starts as well, right? So that's not really beneficial to the town. I don't know, Tom, do you have any opinions on this that you can share?
David's accurately stated it. The prior analysis was for a much larger, more intensive development. That's the basis of identifying the deficiency. What will happen if this project alone goes ahead? Is that culvert currently deficient? How much does this add to it? We don't know. That hasn't been quantified. So, and I think it's probably a good idea to quantify it.
Is that hard to do?
Yeah, is that a difficult task to just tell us what the reduction is based on the new footprint of the project?
We have that based on our site analysis, and we're part of that watershed, so we do have those answers.
Okay,
So-
can we provide that to
Yeah,
to
to
Tom
Tom.
and?
I think that the best thing to do is we'll work with your peer review consultant to make sure that, you know, our projects as it stands, or any modifications, slight modifications we can make to it, we'll do the best we can. We have put our best foot forward and put a lot of stormwater management into the site. We haven't really taken much quote-unquote credit for the groundwater recharge because it winds up being a technique to argue how you did it. So we've taken the most conservative way that we can at this point, so.
Yeah, the new size of the footprint may make this a
Yeah.
non-issue and we just move forward from there.
I think that's the best thing to do, is we'll work together to make sure that we can provide those answers to the planning board.
So then I skip to kind of those items that are, kind of letters and confirmations that, Tom was asking for, postmaster letter from the fire chief regarding, the peer review.
We have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 3 PM with the fire captain and his consultant, so, to try and wrap these things up. So we would expect to be able to get that letter to the board and Tom shortly after tomorrow's meeting.
And then, the one thing I did miss actually is Tom's discussion of the emergency access road, connection. So, I mean, it's not a request here, but I don't know what the applicant has to say about it, and I don't know where the board wants to go with that or not.
Yeah, it was certainly one of the open items that I wanted to speak in more detail about.
Right, so this was one of the big issues, so do we want to save that for the discussion towards
Yeah,
the?
to the
okay.
end, after we
Okay.
get through the bullets, we'll go back to the,
Okay, so
I
I
think
didn't.
we're through.
Yeah, I'm pretty much through those before we were to.
Should we talk about the emergency access?
there was
For
only
the-
the, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about the emergency access. Item number 46, was it? That talked about
yeah,
the,
right.
the water loop.
Yes.
And is this tied to who would be responsible for pumping the water, or is this strictly?
Well, the development agreement, in your draft decision, I had included a provision in the draft decision that we'll get to, which repeats a requirement from the site plan approval from JPI regarding, complying with the appropriate NFPA standards, building code standards for pressure for fire suppression as well as habitation. And if there wasn't adequate pressure, that the applicant would be required to have a booster station. But the development agreement, which I missed, it does, in paragraph 15 of the development agreement, does indicate that the town has agreed to provide adequate supply and pressure to the development at the MBT access road and the residential road. So I'm not sure, I don't know if they can test this now or not. There's no water up there yet, right? So I don't know how they could test it in any event. But
And as Tom walks up there, and you say to the development, meaning the applicant would take it from the development in through the development?
yeah, so we can,
if
I mean, we can
necessary, or how's that
refer to
interpreted?
the development agreement in the decision, which I've already done, because that was an agreement in the development agreement that it would be wrapped up into the site plan review. But paragraph 15 says that in consideration of the commitments made in this agreement by the developer to the town acknowledges that it presently has and will continue to provide adequate water supply and pressure at the connection point located where the MBTA access road intersects the development road in the service of the development.
Sounds good to me.
We, just FYI, Dave, you wanna we have done some testing, so we can actually answer that question.
Yeah, so just, when we start to talk about, David Eastridge with Thorndike Development. When we start to talk about utility services for the site, we kind of cross the line from the design of Lot 1 to the design of the MBTA access road. We have done flow tests in this area at our proposed water connection to High Street, at the Dunkin' Donuts, and also at Baldwin Circle, which elevation-wise is above us, and on the plan is kind of below that plan. So we've done those. We've provided that information to Allen Major, who's doing the design for the MBTA access road, so they can use that in their design of the water supply system, that comes up to us. So we've done the work, provided the information to the design engineer, and now it's kind of in his court to decide what, if any, modifications to the water service needs to be done to provide adequate service, not just to our front door, but to the fire hydrants that are gonna go, along the MBTA access road and such.
Emergency access road? Can we talk about that?
Yes.
We have stated all along that we are prepared and willing to work with the town to investigate and ultimately, if it's feasible, construct a emergency access connection at the MBTA parking lot, and that commitment hasn't changed. We are, however, concerned about the time that would be required to go through that process relative to the obligations and expectations of the fire chief. And this is an issue that we intend to try and flesh out a little more tomorrow. There's been some discussion that he would like to see that emergency access road operational when the first person occupies the first building. I certainly appreciate his perspective on that. It is hard to imagine that we would be able to go through an engineering, design, approval, and construction process with the MBTA on a new roadway in what would amount to 9 months' time. Having said that, we had a meeting with Mike Herbert a little earlier this evening. He's going to put us in touch with the MBTA, and we will try and move forward in that regard. I think that we need to maintain, it's one of the reasons why we have not altered the emergency access location, that needs to be part of the approved plan, but we would accept a condition that would result in our using reasonable efforts to pursue the alternate location. Obviously, there need to be cost considerations as well. We have no idea sitting here today what the MBTA might require in the way of a different roadway. But we certainly do know what it will cost us to build the roadway that's approved, and so that would give us a baseline, and then we can work with the MBTA and see if that's possible. We share Tom's view. There are engineering solutions there. It's just a matter of whether the MBTA, what their position is on it, and we haven't had that conversation.
So, did somebody have a comment? Did you raise your? I just, okay.
Just,
Yep.
one question I have with the emergency access road, we were just talking about the water line that you're looping out to High Street. Is that following the same path? Is that part of the same construction?
Yes.
So you're already doing some of the work there anyway,
Yes.
whether you put the road in, so it's not saving as much as it might otherwise.
That's right.
Actually, to clarify that, it doesn't follow the whole road all the way down. It connects to High Street in the same location. So it's
Just use the microphone for the people at home. That's all right.
So the water line has to connect to High Street, kind of in this location, which is the same location where the emergency access road would connect, but it doesn't go all the way down and up and around like that. So it can go cross-country, for example. So we don't have to clear all this if we're not building the emergency access road.
Frankly, I think it makes it a better plan if we don't need that extra access road.
I can craft a condition that you can review that guarantees an emergency access road, but puts a preference on asking them to use appropriate efforts to work with the MBTA, et cetera. So I can
Right.
draft something for you to take a look at.
Yeah, I'd like that. I'd like to define, I think, what appropriate efforts are, and possibly, is there an interim solution?
What?
You know, I know you're meeting with the fire chief tomorrow. If his timeline doesn't meet what we think it will reasonably take, is there an interim solution that we can put in place?
Well, that emergency access road.
Well, there's the
Yeah.
emergency access road, but is there an
Right.
interim solution that we can put in place without clear cutting, you know, the whole
My,
area?
my thought is, we say that they could proceed without the emergency access for the occupancy of perhaps the first 4 buildings, which is more generous than the fire chief was saying, but I think that still makes it very clear that we're going to get the emergency access. And say that the on the plan emergency access is not to be built until they come back to the planning board with a plan saying what the emergency access is, and if it's an alternate plan, then they build the alternate instead. So essentially, we're saying, ultimately, you can build the emergency access on the plan if you need to, but if you can come back to the planning board with something better before you occupy the 5th building, that's great.
Let me suggest that we work with Lisa and Nat in trying to craft something that is consistent with your thoughts and ours. There are other considerations that we need to take into account. The sequencing of the construction is very important. You know, that slope that we would need to build is stabilizing garages, that is stabilizing parking lots. It's not as, there's more involved than just deciding on, you know, delivering several buildings. The site work will be done well in advance of the buildings being occupied. But I hear what you're saying. I don't think if, you know, this is really a, you know, several step process. We approach the MBTA and they say, no way, we're not interested, you know, and Nat's with us or Mike's with us, and, you know, we pursue it, and it, you know, or alternatively say that's a great idea.
So may I suggest that between now and the next planning board meeting, the MBTA be approached and we sort of gauge where they
I
stand?
can't make that commitment. We have
Oh, you
so
can't?
much, no, this is something that's gonna have to be a post-decision effort. We can certainly see if we can schedule a meeting, but we have a decent amount of homework. To have a productive meeting with the MBTA,
Prior to the closing of this procedure?
no, to have
Proceeding?
a productive meeting with the
Yeah.
MBTA, we should really do some preliminary engineering. We wanna go in there and and show them what we're dealing with, as opposed to walking in and saying, you know, you got a road, doesn't work, we'd like to make it better. I think that there's a sequence here that we need to follow if we're to have our best likelihood of success. And there's some work involved there. It's not something that we can do in a matter of a couple of weeks, not with everything else going on right now.
The MBTA was involved in the previous site plan in
Right.
some of the negotiations, and my recollection is they do not move quickly. That may have, things may have changed,
No.
but I would not expect, and would not
So-
want
Right,
to
I was
condition.
just interested in sort of understanding, you know, what would be involved
Yeah,
in
it-
working with them. Just in where, how would we even start working with them? What, you know?
So to Nat's point, I feel like we've talked about this. This has been an item since early on in the project, and here we are a few months into this, and we haven't made contact yet, right? So that's pretty disappointing to hear that we haven't made contact. And to your point, I think even before you get in front of them, there's gonna have to be, you're gonna have to contact the MBTA to figure out when they can meet, what the requirements would be for a meeting, what we need to bring in or what we should have. So there is some legwork, I think, to be done where we can start the conversation with them at least to see if they're even entertaining the idea. Because there's no sense of you guys going through a whole bunch of effort to sit down with them.
We'll make the phone calls.
You know what I mean?
I was more, I was responding, I think I misunderstood what Nat was suggesting. But I think to have that first meeting, we can certainly reach out, try and set up a meeting, to your point, understand what they'd like to see at that meeting for work products, and then we're gonna need to do the work. And there's, just so you understand, the first thing that has to happen is we need to survey that area. You know, we can't do anything that will have any meaning without getting out there with a survey crew. And that's a process that we have to go through that in itself will take a couple of weeks.
Okay. And I know you'll get creative somehow drafting up some kind of condition that we can
Sure.
review. And whatever the condition is, I think we should have planned or periodic updates to the board, where you guys can
course.
come in, whether it be bi-monthly or quarterly, whatever seems to be the right timing. But to make sure we are making progress and moving ahead and if we're not, understanding what we're doing instead. So if there could be a timeline associated with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that was the last thing off of Tom's list, last big item, and I think before we go maybe to Lloyd's letter and the decision, I just have a confirmation. What I'm looking at a set of plans, which I think Tom refers to in his review letter dated 12/15, and they are not coordinated with the landscaping plan.
Correct. The plans that the board and Tom will be receiving this week will be coordinated with the landscape
Okay.
plan. And we would expect, subject to whatever additional comments and changes that Tom asked for, that those would be the plans of record.
Just one general question about the plan that's shown on the screen. Does that reflect the reduced parking you've asked for? And if not, which parking spaces would not actually be constructed, given the waiver?
It's in the very similar area. In the very similar area, the parking stalls that wouldn't be constructed are located in this area back here. Might be just one or two for the dog walk.
And what's it looks like there's a little extension on the back there off of one of the parking garages. Is that more parking?
That's a maintenance facility.
Okay.
That's a maintenance building. I should have mentioned that, I'm sorry.
So it's a very, very similar plan, some enhancements through the landscape architecture process.
All right. So I think we're all set on the emergency access road, I think. I'm just seeing some nods that we're all in agreement that it's the preferred option, and if we can avoid additional land clearing on High Street, a scenic road, it'd be the preferred option. Yeah. All right. All right. Lloyd, can we, I guess, go to the letter next and kind of
course.
talk about some of the items on the letter?
So I forwarded a letter to the board right before New Year's for your weekend reading. And there were two issues that we wanted to bring to the board's attention, understanding full well that they would require discussion this evening. The first has to do with the whole question of trying to ensure that as many people as possible who live here and want to use the train either on a casual basis or a daily basis have an opportunity to do that without driving their car down to the parking lot. And we had, as a result of the board's making it clear to us that this was an important issue for you, come up with this idea of the Hillavator. It's actually my idea. And we really like it a lot. And I know that it's received some very positive feedback from people here in town. What has happened is that as we have drilled down into the nuts and bolts of this, and you know, we had been asked the question, how much usage might we expect? Would a 6 to 8 person car be adequate? Do we upgrade to an 8 to 12 person car? And that led us to looking at several other apartment communities in the area, and we actually reached out and talked with the manufacturers of the Hillevator. And the more we got into this, the more we unfortunately came to the conclusion that this particular site and our particular conditions do not lend themselves well to this solution. And the reason for that is that it is a 1/3 of a mile walk from here to here. And it's uphill. There's a 6-floor, 60-foot elevation change between here and here as well. And the Hillevator idea, if you could imagine the train station being somewhere where I've got my red dot over here, so that everyone who lived here had to walk this way anyway, and the Hillevator, let's say, got them from right across the street down, we would capture the majority of the population of the community because their natural path and their natural flow would take them to the point of the Hillevator. Alternatively, if we had a more intense density, not that I'm suggesting that here, but a mid-rise development that clustered more homes up at this end of the site and wasn't stretched out the way it is, so that the connection point to that Hillevator was easier for a larger percentage of the people, it would also work better. So we found ourselves questioning whether or not at the end of the day we were going to spend all this money to build something which most people would find to be at best an intriguing option in good weather. We had, frankly, at the time prior to proposing this to the board, discussed the obvious solution, which has been tried and true in New England, of a shuttle service, which allows you to vary the intensity of the shuttle service to demand so that you can modify the hours based on the time of year. You can pick people up at their front doors as opposed to making them walk. You can adjust the number of shuttle services. And of course, even more importantly, in many respects, as the RTD district gets built out more, that shuttle service could be shared among multiple communities at a very cost-effective basis. From our perspective, the shuttle service is a much worse solution financially than the Hillevator, because it's an expensive hit on our operating budget as opposed to a fixed cost up front. But we could not get ourselves comfortable, based on the people that we spoke to, with the idea that we were going to get the usage that we needed. So having made the commitment to the board to try and address this issue, we have now fallen back on a shuttle service solution. And that's a little bit of the history of the thinking that's been going on. We have gone so far as to we've gotten a cost proposal from the people who construct it. We've gotten maintenance, operating expenses. I mean, we've chased this thing quite far. And, but in the end, we are very concerned that someone would walk up to the Hillevator only to discover that they missed the tram, and in waiting for the tram then missed their train, and that would be the last time that they would use the facility. So that's our thought process behind it. We are still committed, and we're still proposing, and we would accept as a condition, you know, the requirement to have a shuttle service, which is an extremely efficient and flexible solution that, while maybe not as cool, I think will wind up being much more effective in the long run.
Thoughts from the board?
I really like the Hillevator. It connected it. It made the, you know, these rail transit district apartments really connect to the T. you could see it, it just made a connection. Shuttle service, you could say, okay, yeah, we offer a shuttle service. I mean, you pull up to anyone that goes by, says, wow, okay, that's there's a T station. I mean, it's just a connection. So I thought it was a great idea, and I loved it, and I thought it was gonna be good. Surely you knew the distance when you proposed it. That didn't just pop up. The third of a mile, and now you're going to a shuttle service that can be flexible. How many stops are you gonna have? What hours is that gonna run? The Hillavator is, you know, if you come back from a night out on the town, you got your fob and boom, you're there. You know, you're working late, you're stuck in the office, you come back, it's there. What's gonna be the hours of your shuttle service? How many stops are you gonna have? You said you can pick them up at the door, but I don't think you're gonna drive door to door. You'll probably have maybe 2 bus stops or something for it. What's gonna be the commitment to the shuttle service? The Hillavator will stay there. Now your shuttle service is, we can vary it. Okay, yeah, we ran it, we didn't really pick people up, so we cut back hours, and the thing runs, 2 times a day.
Well, you're not gonna get any argument from me. I love the idea. It's a sexy idea. I thought it'd be pretty cool. We thought it would make a great PR piece, the whole 9 yards.
I agree.
So, look, I'm the one who proposed it. I'm also the one who killed it. Because, all that sounds great until the day it becomes an albatross and we become the laughing stock of the area with the Hillavator that never gets used. And I tried to picture myself. I always try and do this with these things, I tried to picture myself living in any one of these buildings, and whether I was going to make that commitment to walk uphill to the Hillavator, to go downhill. And, when this issue was brought up to us, it was brought up to us from the perspective of, and I think it was you, Preston, that initiated it, we don't want cars from this community clogging the MBTA train station, taking spaces from others who might need them, and, of course, it's not an energy efficient solution. So if we are able to provide easy, reliable, consistent access via a shuttle service, I think that the odds of people using it, and it's free, I think the odds of people using it are greater than if they have to walk a distance to get to something else. And it's just that simple. While it may be a really neat idea, if our goal here is to get more people not using their cars, we believe the shuttle service is a better solution. This is not a cheap solution for us. It's not as though we're saving money here. It's that we're trying to be both responsive. If we're gonna make the commitment, we wanna make a commitment that we feel will work. And we don't wanna have something that people look at and say, God, 5 people used that today.
Can you answer Max's question, though, about the hours of operation and the
We would
number of
expect,
stops?
yes, we would expect to run it during peak hours, morning and evening, and we've talked about coordinating an Uber system that, as you know, has become incredibly effective, utilizing people who are living within the apartment community that would be available probably for a fee on the non-peak hours to collect people at the train and bring them down. So a combination of the two. But, the commitment that we're making is for the shuttle service, but that's another idea that we've explored.
The shuttle service scenario, who will initially foot the bill? And what's the subsequent plan to subsidize the funding for the said shuttle service?
Well, the issue is really the same with the Hillavator. I mean, the answer is that we haven't gotten to that level of discussion. We would expect to be providing the service. And whether or not ultimately there was a charge to use the Hillavator, or there might be a small charge for the shuttle, that's something that we haven't discussed internally, to be perfectly honest.
Lisa, how would one go about conditioning a shuttle service and payment for it in perpetuity?
Well, I'm confused, because Lloyd, I thought you just said that the shuttle service would be at no cost.
It said 3 things. It was like 3 different things.
Yeah, no cost.
Then Uber.
Right.
An Uber system.
Yeah, I don't think we can make that commitment, that it would be at no cost. You know, we will, you know, the cost of a, parking your car down at the train station is significant. We certainly need to make this in such a way that it's a very attractive solution. But we had not previously committed to the Hillavator being completely free either.
Well, no, I'm following up on a comment you made. You just earlier said it would be at no cost, and so that's why I'm following up.
And I think that that is our expectation initially. We have not fleshed this out completely, just putting it on the table. You know, this is something that we knew we were going to discuss this evening. I think that our thought is that we would go back to the drawing board and come up with a more detailed proposal that we could present to the board.
So, we could draft a condition that would set the parameters for it initially, would be required to be carried through as part of the permit. And, you know, the way you control it is you say that if it changes, it's gotta come back. And that's ultimately the way you control it.
I want to go back to the Hillavator because I disagree with what Lloyd's saying about, because I put myself in you know, the shoes of anybody that if I'm living there, if my wife's living there, and I look at it and I say, okay, if I live in this nice, new, beautiful apartment complex, and I live there with my wife, okay, and so she's going to work in the morning, and she's coming home at night, or she's going out with her friends, is she gonna, you know, the Hillavator's there, she can walk through the apartment complex to it. She can go right down to the T station. No matter what time she comes home at night, the Hillavator's right there. She can get back up. She can be at home or be at least in the apartment complex where I would feel safe, she would feel safe. As opposed to hoping that Uber's by, or, you know, I mean, if it's not on the peak hours, the shuttle service probably ain't gonna be there. So now she has to walk up around this access road. I think that the Hillavator, I think that it would get used. I think that, you know, how much, I don't know, but I know that if you live in this area of it, it's a no-brainer. I think it makes a direct connection. And I think that it's something that you guys, you're throwing out, but it got rave reviews from everybody that was here. You thought it was a genius idea when you brought it up. And now you're killing it. And it seems to me that, are you killing it because you really think it's a bad idea? Or is it that, well, the cost, you don't want to spend the cost, so you look at this shuttle service that then you can put off onto people. Well, it might start off free, it might run from these hours, you can scale it back, and then next thing you know, the thing is, it's gone. These are rail transit district apartments. We should focus on getting people on the T, and I don't think that it should be something that's thrown out yet.
Look, this is a very hard call for us, and I'm not gonna, like I said, I understand where you're coming from, Max, and you know, we've really been challenged in thinking this through. If we could look into the future.
Give yourself more credit.
If we could,
it was a great idea, Lloyd.
If we could look into the future 5 years, you know, and you know, 100 people were using this thing every day, and you know, it was the hallmark and the cornerstone of this thing. You know, sign me up right now. But we live in New England, you know, and weather is a factor here. And walking uphill in bad weather is not a pleasant experience when you've got your briefcase and you've got your packages or whatever the case may be. And I have a hard time getting over the fact that if I picked 100 renters, young people for the most part in these types of communities, and said, which would you rather have? A shuttle service that will pick you up at your front door in any kind of weather and drop you off at the front door of the train, or a Hillavator that you can walk to and take at your own leisure? We have come to the conclusion that the shuttle service will get much more
It
use.
gets them one way, because then they're going to say, okay, I go in, I commute into town. After town, I go, you know, after work, I hit the gym, I go out for dinner with some friends, and when I come back at 8 o'clock at night, your shuttle service isn't there. So
Well,
it's one way at best. I say I take the guaranteed transportation that I know is there. I have a fob. I walk up. I hop on my Hillavator, and I'm at my complex. I take the Hillavator.
Well, you know, I've described our position. I think what we would like to suggest, at least, is that we craft something for the board's consideration, understanding where you're coming from on this. You know, it's just not something that we feel comfortable moving forward with at this time.
Throw in another alternative that might, because I was thinking the same way Max was when I first saw like a chain of rebuts on his emails, like no, no, no. So, I would clearly, obviously you guys study the bylaw, you look at it, one of the first things that pops right out, features and site layouts that are conducive to walking, biking and transit riding. We'll come back to the biking and the walking a little bit. But the, so I thought about that for a second, and what I did like about what you're proposing, assuming you can address what Max is pointing out, which is the fact you get stranded somewhere. But if you could reach a minimum level of service, meaning the bus could be preferable if it's like a small little, what is it, MRA or MWR? It's not the one that.
Even a private service.
There you go, the private service.
Right.
So let's say it's a small bus, but it is accessible all the time. Then what I do like about, this is the counter argument for maybe, this could actually unlock the full potential of this whole development, because the issue we have is this is actually the piece that's the closest. And if we can't accomplish getting people to the T from this piece, is an age-restricted one just south of this really going to get people to the T? Which age-restricted housing is people still want to go around, and the T is perfect for them. You know,
Right.
The other side of the road could be office, lab, light industrial, commercial, recreation, multifamily rental also, any age. We also have another area even further down the street, which could be office, lab, light industrial, commercial, recreation, age-restricted housing, and then who knows where this other section D is going to go. That's also office, lab, light industrial, commercial, recreational, and age-restricted housing again. So these lower pieces, no way they can make it up. So what I did like about the bus piece is it does potentially set the tone for the whole development to use the same service. I said, and unlock the development as far as getting the road upgraded and that type of thing. But to Max's point, there has to be they have to use it. The whole thing falls apart, in my opinion, if it starts out great, the services stops being provided 6 months later, a year later, or 2 years, or 3 years later, and doesn't, the department owners in general aren't going to take it up to, let's organize and take down the management company and get it back on.
Let me make a couple of comments on that regard, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. And that's where I'm saying, you know, we've now thrown this out. Let us put something on paper that we'll send over in the next couple of days for the board to chew on a little bit, that puts some meat on the bones as to what this commitment would really look like. But I do think, John, you've hit the nail on the head. I had my offices at Marina Bay for 5 or 6 years. And Marina Bay, at its build-out, which had, much like this RTD district, there were actually half a dozen different developments that occurred there. We happened to build one of them. They had a shuttle bus that was dedicated to Marina Bay. They had enough riders that they owned the shuttle bus and they hired the driver, and that bus went round and round all day long, from 6 in the morning till 9 or 10 at night, because there was enough ridership to support it. And you knew, if you worked at Marina Bay, it was taking you over to the Red Line stop, is what it was doing. You knew that if you waited 10 minutes, the bus would come by. That's about what the cycle was. And it was because they had the critical mass to be able to support that. So you're absolutely right in the sense that this is the first piece, hopefully, of a larger project, and we would absolutely look to share that service.
But to be very specific, just because while you're working on this, for me, the crux of this is this has to essentially be free to the residents. If it's a cost, or is a cost that can be changed and doubled or tripled or quadrupled, it completely loses control of its ability to get people down to the station. And I would think that you still have a lot of flexibility, because when this does build out, even if it's not you guys, maybe somebody else has this later, or the management company, you're negotiating a yearly contract with probably a provider, and the contract gets more lucrative if they're also going to serve the next one down. You'll get a better price, ideally, when you're negotiating that, as other pieces and a better route performs, but I think the minimum level service is what I'm very interested in. I think it has to be at no cost to the residents and has to essentially be round the clock. And does that make sense? And then if somebody, and I would really prefer to see something where you can set a limit of an amount of time somebody would potentially be sitting and waiting. It can be a reasonable limit too. I mean, I'm not looking for something out of range, but
Tied to the train schedules.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
try to, I wouldn't say around the clock, but tied to the train schedule.
yes,
Last train.
yeah, there you
first.
go. But at a minimum, but at least somebody shouldn't be waiting, I would think, more than 30 minutes. Say this time of year, if you're waiting down at the T even for like 15, 20.
30 minutes is a long time for a commute,
Yeah.
it's a long time. to be
15?
waiting.
This time of year, you'd probably die. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you tie to the train schedule,
like
and
about a
instead of
10
going
minute.
door to door, I just don't think door to door works.
Yeah.
You may have 4 pickets.
then what's the max amount of time? Because we want to be specific now with them if they're
About
going to.
10 minutes, 10, 15,
15-minute max?
10 to 15-minute max.
15 minutes, I mean,
What?
15 is a lot.
quick.
But
it's a
peak
max,
time, if it's one
max.
bus,
I
and
mean,
you got
maximum time.
you got 30 people
getting.
getting off.
All right, guys, just one
15 minutes then?
talk at a time.
I really would like
We're in the
to
weeds.
have the opportunity to digest what the board
Yeah, but I want
has
to give you
said.
specific stuff to go back with, so you're not coming
Okay,
back and it's
sure,
back and forth,
that's
back and
fine.
forth.
Yeah.
If there's so you probably hear us talking right now, if you heard that, the board's interested in general, the minimum level of service being to follow the T schedule. Am I following here? And not be waiting more at max 15 minutes after the last train, or even at any time. Nobody would have to be sitting there waiting. Like a day like today, you'd die, you get frostbite and sitting outside. If you didn't have the ability to walk, for instance, say you're handicapped and you're getting off the T, you're sitting there waiting for your bus driver to come get you. So if we're looking for those kind of things to be in a minimum level of service, or at least I am. I don't know
And I
about you
think,
guys.
Max,
Yeah,
you
I
also
think-
mentioned 4 or 5
Well,
separate.
or figure out what you're gonna do as far as you know how many, like, if you say you can get picked right up at your door, but I mean if you go door to door to door to door, then that takes maybe a 10-minute cycle and turns it into a 20-minute cycle. If you just have points, okay, this is we're gonna have 4 pickup points in the apartment building, and then people can be there and they know exactly what time, and then you can shorten your loop down because hey, you're boom 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 boom, you make your loop, you come back up, and then at the max 10 minutes or something. I mean,
Yeah.
and tie it to the T schedule and
Yeah.
Yeah.
and have it guaranteed and for
So,
This is the key, though, for me, to the whole thing.
it's the only way that people are gonna move in here and say,
That's the appeal.
yes,
That's the hook.
I'm living here and I know that it's because I have access to the T without getting in my car and everything, and that's the only way to do
yeah,
it.
as far as how to pay for it, I mean, I'm sure you guys can figure out the cost with the renters and the deals, and there's ways to bear that cost, I'm sure. I agree with these guys. I don't want to drift away from the idea of transit, and the elevator it was a great idea. I didn't know if it was ever feasible based on the schedule of the way it was gonna go, unless it was accompanied by a stairwell. And I thought the stairwell was important, but I know that area is probably difficult to provide a stairwell to ADA compliance. So if the shuttle, and John actually hit the key, and you mentioned it, if the shuttle could be provided and kind of catch on across all the other parts of the RTD, I think that could be a viable solution. I'm not as comfortable with, you said, propose some kind of Uber system. Does that mean just use Uber? You know what I mean? I think, is that what you were just saying, they would just use Uber? I don't know. But if there was a way, I mean, certainly, I don't know if you guys have 24-hour staffing or whatever kind of staffing you have, but the Holiday Inn can drive you to work or wherever where they got a little shuttle. Maybe there is a late night way to pick people up in.
Well,
if they needed
if you
to.
got the shuttle tied to the T, to when the T
All right, if
runs
the
in,
shuttle's tied to the
if
T.
you're on the T, it's gonna be there. If there's not a train, then it's not there.
As far as, is there any other way to still provide any kind of cut-through? Perhaps not down the steep slope, but is there a trail or anything else that can be put in for people that may want to walk, where they don't have to walk a third of a mile from this backside out to the
Well,
front?
the two points of connection, you may recall back when we talked about allowing people to walk down the emergency access road to High Street,
Right.
which we may not be
May not
eliminating.
have.
But if it does get built, that is an alternative route that I suspect people living at this end of the property would wind up using. There's no reason they can't walk down there. High Street can be a little tricky, in this section, but they could walk along and then come in on the MBTA emergency access road. So
There
there
are
is
not
that
currently
connection.
sidewalks on High Street.
There is not a sidewalk on High Street,
So
that's
that's
right.
A little
And
scary.
this is all the same deal. It's 120 feet from here to here. It's a 12-story building.
Lloyd, what is it out of in the middle, part, not where the T is in the north side?
It's
but
wetlands. This is
it's
all
all wet,
wetlands in
okay.
here. We didn't show the wetlands because they're not on our property, but that's wetlands. Parasailing might be one option.
Cable car?
Zip line.
Helicopter.
Something, Thomas.
Yeah, Tom, please. Do you have an opinion on the stairs?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging problem. It's about 1,600 feet from the project entrance down to the MBTA station. The grades are a little hard to pick up off Mass GIS, but there's an approximate 90-foot elevation difference between the project entrance and the railroad station parking lot. So that means the existing MBTA access road has a slope of about 5.5%. Now that's ADA accessible because their regulations allow a walkway to follow a roadway, even if it's steeper than 5%. But if you were to try to build a pedestrian walkway between the MBTA station and the project site, it isn't even ADA accessible. It's in excess of 5% unless you start switchbacks or something like that. The emergency access road out to High Street, it's about 500 feet long and it's sloped at 11% for virtually its entire length, so that's not ADA accessible. So, you know, ADA access for pedestrians is very difficult on this site. I think the good aspect of either a elevator, I'd like to see it simply because in all my career, nobody's ever proposed to put in a elevator, but nonetheless, at least a shuttle service, you give any person living there and a person who's physically challenged the ability to take the same route to the station, which I think is most consistent with ADA practice and policy. So I think you need some sort of automated system to get down to the station, whether it's a shuttle service or whether it's something else. But
Yeah, sure, that's the same thing.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
On to the next item in my letter.
Yes, so do we agree we'll have
I think we're gonna come back to
something
you with a
drafted up
proposal.
as far as a proposal
You can give it to
of
me.
another idea and
time,
discuss it?
We can look at it.
Yeah, I suspect that we're gonna have to have another conversation about this, you know, but I think that we've heard you loud and clear. We'd like to go back to the drawing board, put our thoughts together.
Yeah.
We're not gonna wait till the next meeting, we'll send this along. This is obviously an important issue for the board, it's an important issue for us. I might suggest that if it's possible to have there might be a few items that we wanna have a little work session with a subgroup before the next meeting, given our time constraints. But that's something we might
I can
talk
call
about
if
at
you
the
want
end
me
of the
to,
meeting.
conference call. I can be on that if you want me to.
Okay.
So, we'll work on that immediately and get something through Nat, to
And
the
you,
board.
and just to be one additional thing while we got Lisa, and I'm not, I'm harping on this one because I really do think this is the key to the entire rail transit district, like the access. This is why I appreciated you looking into the elevator, which I kept calling the elevator. But I really think we have to find something where there's some performance guarantee, even if it's bonding, deed restriction, something real serious, because even if you sell it later on, this has to stay. We don't want this to become a Village of the Americas or something that's this constant albatross was the good word. And now we have 400 voters in there, plus maybe it's 500 people that like to show up and come here. you know, years after everybody's hopefully gone and things have gone very well and all that, and somebody else screws it up and decides not to provide the service, and then now we're dealing with it. So I think it's got to be something real meaty. Nobody could misunderstand it. It's not buried in a condition somewhere deep in an agreement. So,
Okay, well, that went well, so let's move on to our next hot topic, which is the multimodal trail. If I may, let me just try and recap, I think, where we were and where my understanding is where we may be at this moment in time. I think at each of the meetings that we've had, and I've had 2 meetings outside of these meetings with Joel to talk about the larger hope for a multimodal path that connects a much larger area that this would be a part of. We've met with Tom Powers and Bob Gaynor and talked about connections that might occur on the opposite side of the MBTA access road into downtown. That seems to be a much, much cleaner path that could be followed with existing old railroad bed and whatnot. And we had at the outset represented to this board that we feel very strongly that this multimodal path system is an excellent idea. We think that our residents would be major users of it. We'd love to see it occur. We know that there's been $200,000 set aside as part of the MassWorks grant to start this process going. And we offered that we would support any proposal that made sense along the Lot 1, Lot 2 property line, and went so far as to sketch out a possible path for the board that seemed to make sense because it would follow an area which was really not buildable land, because it would be within the setback requirements of Lot 2. In other words, not being able to build within 15 or 20 feet of the property line. And it would also be at the very top of our slope, which would also make it a difficult to use in any other way. So conceptually, this was the idea that we put forward, fully expecting that this would need to be studied and researched and investigated, engineered to see how it might work with a larger plan. Somehow that discussion morphed into a draft condition that has asked us to design, engineer, build, and maintain a multimodal path through Lot 1. I'm unaware of any discussion in a public meeting that proposed anything like that. It showed up in the draft decision. So when we saw that, we decided we better do some quick investigation, and we did take a closer look at the Lot 1, Lot 2 interface. And as I mentioned in the letter, realized that there were some extremely challenging engineering issues with putting a path along that alignment. Specifically, the grades are quite steep in areas, to the point that we really weren't sure how the heck you would engineer this thing and avoid calamity with people racing down a 10% grade. So for us, where we come out on this is that it seems as though the necessary next step in this, I'll call it a bike path, I know it's a multimodal path, but is that there needs to be some sort of a feasibility study that investigates how this thing wants to get through the town of Ashland and where the best places for it to go might be, and along with a preliminary feasibility analysis to see whether that's possible. The idea of building a little section within Lot 1, which we're not even really sure how that would work, putting aside the cost issues for the moment, without understanding how it fits within the larger master plan, seems to us to be putting the cart before the horse. Not to mention the fact that this has always been, since we showed up in town a public project with public funds allocated for it, namely the $200,000 to get it started. Our position isn't changed any. We would like to be supportive of this process, and if there are easements necessary on the Lot 1, Lot 2 interface, if that proves to be a path that others decide makes sense, we would be happy to cooperate. But that's where we end up on this, this particular issue.
Comment first?
Right, so, just going back to what John said before, and this is related about the bus, right? What's important is that a condition be carefully pulled together that locks that into the future for perpetuity. And I think that touches on one of the planning board's major problems in that once this process is over, we no longer control what happens. And so a study takes us to a certain point, or saying, well, we'll collaborate in the future, that takes us to a certain point, but it really doesn't give the board any teeth or any assurance that they can take a new step moving forward. And so I think whether we talk about an easement or we talk about some sort of commitment, I don't know, maybe that's something to chew on. The other thing I'm interested in doing is hearing from Mr. Houston in terms of bike paths and feasibility and such.
There are a whole bunch of different standards for either mixed user paths or bicycle paths. The guidance that sort of strikes me as perhaps the most appropriate to follow, Mass DOT recommends that mixed use paths have a maximum slope of about 5%. The reason for that is if pedestrians are going to be using the mixed-use path, which they will, it has to be ADA accessible, which gets us to the 5%. Design guidelines purely for bicycle paths, and I don't know how you restrict a pedestrian from using a path that's there if you wanted to, but in terms of bicycle operations, you see guidance again. 5% is an ideal max, but for short distances, grades of 8 to 10% are permissible. The difficulty being with grades of that nature, either it's very difficult to pedal uphill or you get very high speeds for bicycles going downhill. So you come almost back to the prior pedestrian considerations that we discussed with respect to accessing the train station. You're talking about a path approximately 10 feet in width with a maximum gradient of about 5%. I have not seen the conceptual analysis of a bicycle path along the borderline of lots 1 and 2. Whether or not that's feasible, I don't know. Sounds like there really hasn't been detailed study, but it certainly is meritorious in terms of everything Mass DOT is pushing in terms of allowing people to have alternatives to using their cars, in terms of just an amenity for project users. It's nice to be able to bicycle, it's nice to be able to walk. So I think it's certainly an important feature. At this juncture, I don't have the information to identify a specific route that would be feasible at this juncture. So.
Turn it over to the board. Comments, questions?
I've got a lot to talk about here.
All right.
As you know, I'm also on the Trails Committee, so I'm very concerned about this. Just looking at how the conceptual trail fits in with Lot 1 in particular, I understand not doing the route the trail along the property line, that might not be the best solution. but what seems pretty clear is you can see at the lower left of the plan as it shows up on the screen there, you can see off to the left there's a little bit of a paper road coming in, which Bob Gaynor owns and has said, at least verbally, that he'd be happy to see us use that for the trail. So our assumption at this, the working assumption right now is the trail comes in there, and then somehow gets over to the MBTA road. That somehow, the most obvious solution would be for it to cut across the very bottom of Lot 1. This would go through where the, it'd cross the emergency access road, which you may not be building. It would go through that parking lot, which you may not be building, and then would go through where you currently have the dog park. Would be the, so at least that's my thought as to where it seems the trail would most directly impact Lot 1. And then I could see the rest of it being more of a Lot 2 concern once you get past there. The problem, as you've stated, we don't have an engineered path for this trail yet. You know, the committee hasn't had the money to do that, and it's also, you know, not all that useful to engineer a path when we, you know, Gaynor isn't going to say yes until he has a developer for Lot 2 that will say yes.
Well, if the board is looking for us to create, to your point, Nat, so that it's in perpetuity, an easement in this area that you've just identified, Preston, that gets you from, I'll call this point A to point B along our property line, that would allow someone to build a 12-foot wide multimodal pathway, we can certainly take a look at that. I think that the grades in that area are not too bad, right, Dave? It gets a little steep over here, right? Yep. Yeah, so this is challenging in here. See, the problem with this, Preston, is that we're really, I mean, this is a planning board. We're really putting the cart before the horse. You're asking us to make a commitment in space without having done any analysis whatsoever. And while I respect the notion, we spent a few hours looking at this, and all we found were problems. And that's not to say there isn't a solution, but the specifics, sometimes good ideas need to be modified, as you well know, to deal with the realities. And this is a very challenging section of the world here. And I honestly don't know how the best path would be. It needs to be studied in order to make that determination. You know, we have a pretty significant cut that's going on here in this area. This area is probably okay. But you're probably looking at dipping around this, into this area to get past that hill. So again, you know, I really feel on this one we have to take a step back. This RTD district has been around for how long now? Close to 20 years? More? And we're on the 1 foot line of being able to bring a $100 million project to Ashland. And we're accomplishing a lot. We're getting this MBTA road built. We're putting a multimodal path in connection with that. We're doing a lot of things here that are very positive. And I'm respectful of the multimodal desire, but we're not there at this moment in time. You know, I think there's going to need to be a little trust on this one, that our best interest of seeing a path that our people would like to use will lead us to work with you if at the point that you have a solution that makes sense. We're willing to participate in the feasibility study. We're willing to lend our expertise, which is substantial in this area, to look at alternative ways of building paths here. But I can tell you that any path that goes through Lot 1, if there were, for example, to be a path along the driveway here, on this side, which is the only place that I could imagine it going to satisfy the draft condition. Every inch of that path involves blasting. Almost a 30-foot shear wall, because we have designed this specifically so that the slope is peeled back to the edge of the trees here. And if we have to move that slope, every foot we have to move the slope that way, we are moving the peak this way, and it's a very substantial blast. So any kind of a feasibility analysis would look at that section of bike path and say, okay, we can build this piece of bike path for $500,000, or we can build it somewhere else for $50,000. It's just not a good use of money. So I'm just saying that that's the type of analysis that needs to go on.
And I just don't want this development to go in with a lot of good words said, but then ultimately cut off where the path will need to go. And the most obvious place, as I said, is along the bottom there. So if we had a easement, even if it turns out we never need it, because it ends out going farther south of that, that would at least protect the town's interest there.
Well, we can certainly take a look at that.
Okay.
When we get back to you with the shuttle thing, we'll address this issue as well, specifically.
In the draft condition, while Lloyd doesn't appreciate the first part of it, the last two sentences deal with the fact that there's a greater planning effort that needs to happen, and should the path need to be realigned or moved, you know, or built someplace else, that they would participate in that kind of thing. So it requires an easement and then says, but it may be moved, so to
So
speak.
the easement could be modified
Right, essentially,
if
right.
the site was to move the path. So I think that would be important, to get the easement and get an easement that could be modified based on any plans. I had a question, Lisa, in the development agreement, did we, because you made a comment earlier, Lloyd, that we didn't talk
Yeah.
about it, and I do think in the joint committee meeting between the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board, it came up, we talked about a bike path in some detail.
The bike path has been a theme since day one, and
All
we're
right,
not arguing
I thought you
that.
mentioned
It would-
earlier that the
No, I
condition,
just-
you didn't know where it came from, and it.
No,
we
the
had never-
condition that calls for us to design, build, and
Okay.
maintain a bike path on lot one
So it was the language of
was
the
new.
condition.
Well, it's more than language, it's a significant commitment of time and cost that wasn't there
Certainly, but
before.
the fact that there was gonna be a condition and a desire to have a bike path or an easement for a bike path has long been discussed openly.
Well, okay, I've explained our position
Yep.
on this.
Yeah, certainly. Preston, how, being on the committee, does this piece connect? Obviously, the rail, the Upper Charles Bike Trail has been long a plan of Ashland as well. And I think this particular route through the RTD is a key connection point.
It's a very key connection point.
Yes.
If we want to connect if we want to build the full loop, and we want to come through Hopkinton State Park, this is really the only way to then connect in to the rest of town.
Rest of town and over to Ashland State Park eventually.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this is really a vital link that we're not sure that there is another route that we could take.
And I guess to that point, you made the analogy, I think, that we were on the 1 foot line, and, you know, it's a good project for both people, and we're bringing a lot to the town, and we are. I also don't want to fumble the ball on the 1 foot line if this is our one shot, right?
Or have it intercepted.
Or have it intercepted. This is certainly our one shot to kind of get this right, and obviously, we've been trying to work quickly under different time constraints, and if we could do it differently, we probably will look at a different approach, but we're at this point where I don't want to miss something very important to the town, and I think getting this part right is very important to us. So, in all due respect, I understand you don't maybe think that it's feasible to even put in that area, but I think having easements in place that are flexible enough for us to connect to that area is very important to us.
We will take another look, and we'll identify an easement in the area that we just pointed to, you know, along this edge. And we'll craft a suggestion for the board and for Lisa to consider, a commitment along these lines.
And I'd also point out that if we have a paved 12-foot path coming from High Street, connecting into the bottom of your development there, that would presumably normally have some sort of gate or blockage to prevent vehicles coming from High Street, that could potentially be an emergency access as well, that you'd get kind of for free or instead of, you know, in addition, you know. So when we talk about emergency access, you know, what's generally thought of as a bicycle trail, in an emergency, vehicles can go on that.
I understand.
All right. Just in the spirit of transit, these last two are things that came out in the email. Obviously, they're touchy subjects for us, and they kind of were right at the heart of what we've been trying to accomplish a lot of
No, I
with this
appreciate
project,
that.
right? So they kind of came in right at the wire here. All of a sudden, hey, these two things that you guys really like, they're off the table, and so it's kind
Well,
of
okay,
yeah.
I hear you.
You got just one thought on this is, in line with what Preston's saying, when we, prior to you guys, we had several conversations with the owner, you know, the other owner, I guess, who you know what we're talking about, and forget about the golf course and all that went away and all the other, the old plan, I dug it up. Bike path was something that constantly came up, so I know you're dealing with it now. I know this is borderline, almost undoable in certain parts of this site, and I'm not asking for certain parts of that, but there was part of that was pitched to us for a while. You guys are coming in now, obviously trying to modify that plan. My thought in general, I personally, my mindset is I would rather have the easement, and instead of having you guys on the hook to build something or deal with something later, I'd rather that any mitigation or amount that you were gonna put towards that small strip there be put in the town's hands, because the town is trying to, they've got a separate committee dedicated towards trying to connect this Upper Charge Trail. I don't know how much you guys are involved in this, but they've had a lot of time and effort to it, and when they're ready, if they're ready, I think it'd be better in their hands, and you guys can be kinda
Well, we're
clear
not
about.
proposing to spend any money at all with respect to the bike path. What we are proposing is to craft an easement that would allow the $200,000 in the MassWorks grant to be applied towards that construction once you got the other approvals. But there's nothing that we're proposing, nor will there be anything in what I send you that would involve our spending additional dollars on a bike path. I'm sorry if I misled you to think that.
The MassWords grant on this specific section related to that, do you, who ultimately coming to the town, under the town's
That's
control?
town's money.
Okay. So that's ultimately what's you're gonna need for this, to make that actually possible.
And that's money that's gonna be available in 2016, and frankly, the state expects you to spend it. So, that has always been what's been presented to us, and it hasn't been allocated, as I understand it, to a specific location. It is designated for, bike paths.
Okay.
Lloyd, on the bottom half of your email, you had mentioned, it says, the planning board and the selectmen, Campanelli Thorndike committed to funding and managing a financial feasibility study that could be used to evaluate future developments within the RTD district.
Yes.
And then it says, the BOS felt these funds would be better applied to a bikeway feasibility study. You'd be willing to manage that.
That's right. That was just a suggestion, you know, that we would be willing to commit our sweat equity to kind of
So you-
maximize the use of those funds if you felt that it was more timely to do the multimodal analysis than the feasibility
So
analysis.
I guess I want to go, what is the, I mean, I don't know what the funds were for creating a feasibility tool.
Well, actually, the feasibility commitment was a commitment for a specific scope of work, with our having to take on whatever that cost may be. I mean, we obviously contacted RKG, which is the firm that had done the previous financial analysis for the town, to get an estimate from them before we committed to this. It just so happens that we know RKG quite well, done a lot of work with them. But the economic impacts paragraph here says that this is reading from the development agreement. The developer agrees to contract with RKG Associates to update their report entitled Technical Memorandum dated August 13th, 2013. The purpose is to update the potential physical impacts of future development proposals within the RTD district as they may be proposed by the current owner of the remaining property, and it goes on from there to provide the details of the scope that, and it's in the agreement, if you don't have it.
The study is supposed to commence no later than January 15th with a completion target date of April 15th.
So,
This year.
Right.
and so this study's specific to the RTD, and this is not a tool we can use thereafter. Is that correct? Because that was my interpretation, that it would be a tool for the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board to use.
When we discussed this at the time, we talked about asking the RKG to structure the spreadsheet analyses that they did in such a way that it could be manipulated by the town, so that there would be specific scenarios, but you would not just be getting a report, you would be getting the actual structure of the physical impact analysis that could be manipulated.
Okay, so it would be more robust, that could be used.
That's right.
You comfortable, is that?
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure, when I'm reading it, I don't want to make sure it's being left out,
Sure.
and we're getting what we think we're getting.
Sure, Michael Herbert, interim town manager. Really up here just to kind of clarify what the intent was. And what the intent was to have a tool that the town, whether through the planning board or the board of selectmen or staff, could utilize to measure the impact of future developments, both positive and negative, or what could be perceived as positive and negative. If you could use the RTD or maybe future development at the RTD as an example, that would be great, but the intent, at least when the board and the planning board, I believe, talked about it at their joint meeting, was to have something that could be used for developments throughout town. So I don't know if that's, I think that's probably reflected in the planning board's draft decision.
I've added that to the draft decision.
Okay. But that's the intent, and that was the desire of the board.
Okay, and so it goes beyond what's kind of the language in the development agreement of just the RKG update. It's something more robust than that?
Correct.
And is that indeed what will, the intent? Oh,
No,
I'm getting a
not
no.
at all. We
So I'm getting a
worked
no
very
here.
carefully on the language in this development agreement that describes the commitment that we've made. And we certainly expect to work with Mike to make it as user-friendly as possible. And certainly we have no objection to setting it up in such a way that it could be used in a variety of ways. We're not trying to be obstructionist here, but this paragraph lays out essentially a financial commitment that we've made that would allow this level of study to be done. I think we need to sit down with Mike and with RKG and come up with something that meets your goals and works within our constraints as well.
I mean, to the extent that what is in the development agreement matches up with what is in the decision of the planning board, I think that's great. I mean, I don't think we would want to have two separate tools that are being developed, concurrently. But again, I'm just telling you that's what the board's intent was. I think we've talked about it in good faith, and that was what was understood. If somebody was misled or it was misrepresented, I apologize, but that's the intent. I have to say, I wasn't part of the development agreement negotiation process, so I'm kind of coming late to the game. So, but again, I just wanted to clarify the intent.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think, I would, just to clarify this, if the board wants to look at paragraph 10 on page 8 of my draft decision, this is where I talk about the RKG study, or the update of paragraph 41 in the development agreement. And if I understood you correctly, Lloyd, because I also was not a part of the negotiations over this item, so, you say that paragraph 41 says that you're gonna work with RKG, to provide a tool which can then later be used and manipulated for other projects, using your project as a baseline and doing an analysis of the future build-out of the RTD district. Am I stating that correctly?
I don't mean to be coy or whatever, but I would simply read the paragraph. It says that we're gonna study 3 different scenarios. They're gonna be done to the same, I'll read it out loud if that's helpful. I think it's quite clear.
No, but what I'm trying to say is, you said you were talking to RKG about a tool that would do this, but would then be able to be manipulated later, not by you, but by the town
What I discussed.
over other projects.
What I discussed with them was that the work product that they would supply would be an Excel file that was set up for analysis as opposed to just a written report.
Right.
As they would normally, and that they would structure their formulas in
Yep.
such a way that someone who understands financial analysis would be able to take that spreadsheet and manipulate it to other scenarios in the
Right, so it
future.
wouldn't just be a tool that could be, that would do what you're going to do in the RTD, but it could be a tool that the town could use elsewhere. You wouldn't use it elsewhere, but the town could use it elsewhere.
That's right.
Okay, so I don't think we're that far off. So if we can clarify that point in the decision perhaps, then it represents what you've said and what the development agreement also says.
Okay?
What's wrong with it? Like, I don't see,
Excuse me?
I don't see the issue, like, why
Well,
is this an
I
issue?
think the issue about the tool,
Okay.
like you either have a static report
Yeah,
or you have the static report along with the tool that created the report.
that's the way I understand it, too, the way you're saying,
I
it's just a
don't know
workbook
that-
with
I
Excel
don't-
spreadsheets, it's pretty simple. I mean,
Right,
what,
but I don't think that the
decision?
decision, the development agreement
Okay.
says that, exactly.
Okay.
But I think that that's the intent according to what
Okay.
Lloyd has just described.
Got it. You're
We're
okay with that?
that.
Okay, all right, this is simple, I don't know why this is a big point.
All right.
One question on a complete street schedule. That show
Yeah.
up in the decision somewhere?
No,
For MBT access road?
So I think we gotta talk,
You can do that? Okay.
yeah, so, let's go there next,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, whatever.
Right. You're talking about from the development down to the MBTA?
Yeah, just the road
I
itself.
agree, yeah, so, and I had asked that today. Lloyd, do you know the schedule for when the, complete street would be finished from the MBTA access road down to the station? And when that, if that was the only way down to the MBTA station, when that sidewalk would be built and?
The
up to
plan,
standard?
we did have a meeting on this recently with all hands on deck. And the expectation is that work will start in the spring and take probably close to a year to complete. We didn't get into particulars as to where in that process the bike path would be done. Obviously, there's the multimodal path would be done relative to the reconstruction of the MBTA access road. So that's something that I think Dave Manouchian would be better qualified to answer.
Right, we should talk to David, but my understanding is that the Alan Majors plans are supposed to be ready
Yes,
for our final review
I-
in the next 2 weeks.
I communicated with them today,
Right,
and they've told us that they'll be ready a week from this Friday.
okay, so that's good, that's on time. And then as soon as they are peer reviewed, finish the peer review, our peer review person has been working with them all along, but as soon as this final plan is peer reviewed, we've already started to prepare the bid documents, the front end of the bid documents. And they will go out to bid shortly thereafter, I think March 1st?
Right, so that's
Something like that. So then the construction, and my understanding is the construction would all happen together, that the multimodal path and the road construction would occur together, is my understanding, but David should certainly weigh in
Well,
on
there's a
that.
I mean, I don't know that anyone has laid out, in order to do the level of scheduling that you're talking about, we really need to identify a contractor.
Right, it's all gonna be part of the sequencing, but.
Right.
But I guess my point is that the contract being let is for all of it and not for part of it. So however that sequencing happens, it will happen in the same contract.
And who's overseeing, are they ultimately doing the road?
Town.
Are you ultimately responsible for producing the road, dealing with that contract, or does
No,
that come to the
that's
town?
That's
Town
the
is
town
putting
is
that
doing
out
that,
to bid.
hiring a clerk of the works.
Okay, so it's
Right.
not really gonna be something you guys have to deal with anyways.
So removing the option of a elevator or a stairwell, and potentially an access road on the backside of the property, and not knowing if a shuttle's feasible, say when the first unit's built, is there, I mean, I'm inclined to think that without access to the transit area, would we want people living there yet, right? So I'm almost thinking, should the schedule coincide with occupancy permits?
Construction schedule.
And what's your construction schedule?
We're not in control of the reconstruction of the MBTA access road,
Okay.
but I can tell you that that road will have to be
Oh.
stay open, every,
Oh,
you know,
MBTA
300.
The road will, right, but
Right.
I'm just wondering if, are people gonna be able to get down to the rail
The road has
station?
to be done first because the utilities are being put in as a part of that are supplying utilities for
The
this
road
development.
itself?
Yes.
But the sidewalk and everything else be done as well?
I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
until we.
It's gonna be outside their control too, yeah.
Okay. It wasn't a big deal when we had alternative routes to get down to the railroad station if they wanted to, but if there's not a shuttle service in place yet, and there's not a safe way to walk down there, they're gonna be forced to drive, that's all.
Right.
Obviously, the road's gonna be open. So, Did that, we might have had separate questions, but did that answer your question as well?
Yeah.
About the, okay, great.
So, we've talked about the major parts of the decision, of the determination and decision, so I don't know that if the board wants to go through every part of it now. I mean, I
Please
can
no.
revise it based upon what we've talked about and what, the two items that, the applicants are gonna be providing to us, and then get a draft back to the board. Because we've talked about all the large issues.
I think that'd be better from
Right.
a time standpoint. I did want to offer to see if the board had any other items that we did not discuss in detail, and then I wanted to circle back to the stormwater $111,000 mitigation as well, just to kind of wrap them all up today, and then,
You know, we can go through the
Good.
mitigation.
You good? Watching the car charge.
no other issues? As far as the, do you have any opinions on the $111,000?
My thought in general is, if it was there to cover a potential problem developed or produced by developing this site, then yes, it is something that needs to get dealt with. If that overload, quote unquote, is not there because of the reduced scale of the development, then I would say no. Because it seems like it was specific to directing that water down to a certain catch basin in the infrastructure, or basin structure. I mean, it's kind of hard to even figure out what it was. Nobody even really 100% knows where it came from. So the request you had earlier, which was looking into that, just to confirm, right? That, I think, will tell me whether I think that, I don't know, speak for them, but for myself, the crux is based on that. And if that's the case, you probably at the same time want to ask if that's still a reasonable sum of money to fix whatever that piece of infrastructure needs to get fixed.
We can follow with David as well about the.
Okay.
I'll talk to Manugian.
So it's kind of tagged to that, and that's the big question mark.
I would also want to hear from the selectmen who negotiated the development agreement as to whether they think that any mitigation required for improving the culvert should be considered covered by the development agreement and Mass Works grant, as opposed to being something that the developer should be responsible for. Since the financial side of this is both last time and this time were handled by the selectmen, and so I kind of want to hand it back to them and say,
I can follow it.
where do we go with this? So.
Just looking for last comments in general, too?
Yeah, I was just looking for last comments, and I was trying to think of I wanted to give them some direction on what we were thinking for the money, and certainly I can respect waiting to hear more from David as to the infrastructure on that. I mean, I'm also even thinking of, if we can tighten up some of the things we agreed about, and where there may be money issues involved, whether it be making sure we get the better of the tool for development, making sure, there was a couple other things now. Oh, that there's maybe money put towards some kind of bike path study fund or something like that, or whether we need a sidewalk connecting the High Street access road to the MBTA where there's no sidewalk currently and people may walk. I didn't know if there's other ways to utilize a portion of the money where there could be a win-win for both parties. So just something to think about, I guess, after we hear back from David as to what the money could be used for.
So, just my last comments in general. I know this is one of those nights where we kind of beat you up a bit. And if they can address, this is just my thoughts in general, if they can address the things that we're putting out there that really fit the zoning for the rail transit district, then which is, we have them out there, they're out, the gauntlet's been put out there, then this is really, as a whole, a much better project, in my opinion. And it is a smaller footprint. They've improved the buildings. I was really happy to see that they followed the design review recommendations, and they pulled off EFIS, which is the kind of synthetic stucco, if people don't know. They tried to go after a colonial look. And sometimes I think people can even hear us on a meeting like this, and we're like just grinding, and they almost think we have like soured towards a project, and we by no means have. So hopefully you guys are getting the message. We're just talking about the crux of these last key details, which kind of make the project for me. So hopefully we're right there. So.
Well, first of all, thank you, John, for pointing that out, and we certainly take the comments in the spirit in which they're intended. At the end of the day, I think you're going to be very pleased with Campanelli and Thorndike as a development team. We're excited about this project, and I don't say that lightly. And I have no doubt that we'll resolve these last few issues. I continue to be unfortunately concerned about schedule. We have some very serious time constraints that unfortunately are not of our making. We had a brief conversation, Nat and I, about whether there was value to having a meeting next week. I would suggest that maybe even a work session with a subcommittee because we could certainly bring some of these issues back. I'm very worried that we still have some meaty open issues, and if we come to a meeting on January 21st reviewing the revised decision for the first time as a group and going through these issues, if we have to go beyond the 21st, the 20-day appeal period will run out beyond when our closing date for the property is, which is February 15th.
I would suggest that if we go down the route of holding a subgroup or meeting next week, that we take this opportunity now to schedule it.
Well, that's why.
Right? Yeah.
We'll
Right?
do it during the day,
During the day, can we grab
next Wednesday.
3 of you? 2
Well,
of you?
If it's 3 of us, then we've got a
Well,
quorum.
no, right,
and-
We gotta post it.
We got a quorum, and why,
We
could we
can
not
post-
post it?
Yeah, you can.
We could
post
post it.
But it's, would that affect as far as deliberations for people who aren't there and?
No, you're not gonna deliver, they're gonna bring the information back. Even if you had 2 people, you would still have to it still would have to be posted. So 3 is not, 3 is a majority, Yeah, you should do two.
Two.
Two, but it would still have to be
It'd
posted.
still have to be posted.
Correct.
I think, I'm not available next week.
If I'm in town, I'd be
I don't know,
available.
John, you said maybe you would be, I don't
And
know.
you can't do it as a conference call, huh?
We can do it as, we can do it as a conference call. We could call you in on whatever.
Post it. That'd be it.
Can you do it, Preston?
Posted with a
I'll do a
bridge.
I'll do a conference
During
call.
the day on Wednesday?
Next
I
Wednesday.
mean, we're happy to meet in the evening also. I mean, you know, so,
I think I have a Wednesday afternoon meeting already.
I can do Wednesday afternoon.
I'd double
at
check
one
on
of
that.
them. I can do Wednesday, the 13th.
Mike, can you?
So-
I could do Thursday
I
evening.
can't commit to it.
You can't
It's
commit?
not-
Oh, right, 'cause-
not-
right.
Yeah, not know my situation.
But I'd know by Friday if I could, but I might be out of town. If not, I'd be happy to.
So you're available
day or
Wednesday?
evening.
I can do Wednesday call.
Time on Wednesday?
So can we choose the time on Wednesday and commit that?
you
We'll-
say it, we're in,
We'll provide a second body. We'll figure out a way to get you a second body
okay?
on Wednesday.
Do it
1
anytime
o'clock.
before, anytime before 2:30.
1 o'clock?
Yep.
13th?
Wednesday, 1 o'clock, 13?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's shoot Wednesday, 1 o'clock.
Okay. Are we talking about doing this by phone or in person?
Phone?
Well,
Oh.
it would be great if you guys were in person, because you're gonna bring information, but
That's easy enough, we can
Can
be
they meet
here.
with you and you call us on conference?
You guys will be in person, right?
We'll be in person.
We'll get you information before the meeting.
Okay,
it'd be great.
great. Thank you.
Are we done?
We wanna continue it to the 21st.
So I want to continue it. There's a lot of people in the crowd today. Didn't know if there was any comments that somebody heard today that they wanted to make quickly before we continued the meeting to the 21st?
Lorraine Jari, 2 High Street. Curious, with the JPI plan, there was an elevation plan that showed the height of the buildings above the tree line viewed from Pleasant Street. Does that exist?
It does,
Oh.
and we
Is it here? I'd love to see that. And particularly, if I remember right, there were 3 buildings on the north side that were visible.
Let me get it up on the
Oh,
computer.
good.
Okay. Dave, you wanna take this one over? We actually were asked this question by the Design Review Committee, by several specific, residents. So we did a little study here.
Could you just repeat your question, just so I?
Yeah, there was an
Yeah, what-
elevation plan from, the visibility from Pleasant Street that showed what was visible
Oh, from
above the tree
Pleasant Street.
line.
We have this from High Street.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Which part of, Upper High Street or lower?
Still be good to see.
Okay.
Okay, so what,
Now we're all looking.
we were asked by the Design Review Committee, there were a couple butters that showed up to a previous meeting that asked us for kind of views of the community from High Street, and we took the liberty of drawing cross-sections from the homes of the people who came to the meeting as well. So we drew 3 cross-sections. One is right here, which is the closest point between one of our apartment buildings and High Street. And then we drew one from over to 106 High Street and then to 11 Baldwin Circle. So this is the cul-de-sac that is kind of the northern extent of this whole residential subdivision over here.
Okay, that doesn't really address my issue with.
From Pleasant,
From
yeah.
Pleasant Street being the main thoroughfare through this area.
Yeah, we haven't
what
drawn
would
that
be
specifically.
Could you tell me specifically what would be visible?
It's hard to do it without a more
Because
careful analysis.
Specifically with JPI's plan,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's situated in the same area up on the cliff there. It seemed that you're gonna see a lot of roof lines, which with these buildings, very long roof lines, which would look
You do
more
have
warehouse-like.
your rear
That's
elevations.
all you
They do
saw.
have those.
I'm glad to see you have dormers on the buildings, but I'd like to know, are there dormers on the side facing downhill, on the north side? Or is that just on the inside?
No, they are on both
On both
sides.
sides.
So I can't give you a definitive
Can you
answer
guys
on
talk into the
process.
microphone? I'm sorry, just so the
So
people at home
At
can
least
hear
there'll
as
be
well.
some dormers to break up the roof line if that did show.
Yep. Okay.
And then my final point would be with the JPI plan, there was a concession to add a clock tower as a symbol of the town, just to make it more interesting for that viewpoint as you drive down Pleasant Street instead of seeing just a lot of long roof lines. Is that a
Okay.
consideration?
I'll take these one at a time.
Okay.
So starting with the kind of the view, I can give you a few facts, although I can't give you a definitive answer. So this is a very mature forest. You can actually measure the height of trees off of Google Earth nowadays. So these trees are generally 75, 80 feet tall in this mature forest. The slope right in here is about a 30-foot rise. And then our buildings are 4 stories plus a roof over there. So I think, you know, if you were looking, you know, let's say horizontally, you would probably see some of the rooftops of this building. But given that Pleasant Street is low and the trees are going to kind of intercept your view, I think the treetops and the roof line are probably going to be about the same. There are dormers as part of the design.
In the winter, it may be different because you may see a lot through.
Yes, there's very few conifers
Right.
on the site, so it'll be a you know, a filtered view
Was there
in
any
the winter
discussion
time.
of that clock tower that JPI had promised?
You want to take the?
No,
Even replacing maybe 2 dormers and putting in a clock?
no.
That's right.
Okay.
I thought the clock tower was kind of odd.
It did look nice.
Outside the building.
Well, the way
Anybody? One more question?
Yes, Larry DeYoung. I live on Sudbury Road. Preston knows. Following up on Louise's comment, when I look out the back of my house and all that crest of the hills where I live, we see the whole top of that hill. I'm hoping that there will be a robust planting and the lights in such a way, I know that there will be a light glow, but that any bright lights will be shielded, hopefully, from that whole side of town. What I'm concerned with is, even now at the subdivision, the small one at the bottom behind me, there's lights on those houses that are quite bright. And because of the way our houses are situated along the top of that hill, in the wintertime especially, we pick up a lot of light spillover from those houses that comes into our windows. In the summertime, it's not an issue, and I don't think this in the summertime will be much of an issue. I'm a little bit more concerned about basically the light glow that's going to be in the wintertime on that side of the project. Because I will be, and all the houses on the crest of my hill will be looking directly at it, not up at it, but directly at it. So I realize we will see the tops of the buildings. I don't have an issue with that. I'll miss the trees. It's, for me, more important is the light glow that, particularly in the evenings and in the wintertime, that might be there. I'm pleased to see that you have special lighting for, I think they mentioned it early on, some kind, for the parking lot.
Dark sky.
Dark sky, I appreciate that. I'm now a little concerned with the lighting on the houses on that side. And particularly like back entrances, you'll want to have lights there. Is there a way to kind of shield them somewhat so that they have a glow for the needs that you need for safety, but also that they don't spill out and wash the sky?
I actually think we have a pretty good answer for you on that particular issue, although I have to confess it wasn't done for that particular reason. So the design of the site plan, if I'm just going back to the plan here, you will note that all along the edge on the back side are detached parking garages. So they will, between the garage height itself, which is about 9 feet, and the roof above that, which is another 7 or 8 feet, they will provide a 15-foot or so continuous shield from what's going on at the ground, in the ground plane on the backs of the buildings.
And they're basically at the same...
They are, not basically, they are at the same elevation as the entrances along the backs of these buildings.
What are the backs of the garages? Are they closed in or open?
Closed.
Great.
This is a solid wall
In the backside.
on the back side.
Great.
I'm also Morissette, and I'm the trustee for the land at 34 High Street, which is in a butter. And so that, I didn't even think of that lighting, so I'll have to ask you the same question to the immediate left of the property. Yeah, right.
Over here?
Right, well, where's that? Yeah, right in there.
Right in here?
Yeah,
Well, these are all garages as well.
okay. So there's no rear lighting on those?
Well, there's no rear lighting on the backs of the garages, no, that's correct. And the garages, just common sense, will shield with lights that are on the opposite side of the garages.
Okay. And all those trees there to the left of that, those are gonna remain there?
Yes, that's an accurate tree line that's been drawn.
Okay.
It would be even better if we wind up not building the emergency access road.
You don't know how much better that would be.
Why don't you tell us?
Well, I mean, I do wanna thank the board for working on, as well as with you, on working on that MBTA access. Because as they abutter where that road is, that's gonna, if that doesn't get built, that increases the buffer a great deal.
Sure.
To our property, so that's very important to me. So, anything we can do to get that to happen is gonna be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Preston?
Just one thing that was mentioned at some of the previous meetings, is the possibility of electric car charging facilities. Has there been any update on that?
No, we haven't talked about that. I mean, we haven't talked about that any further since we last brought it up.
Is there an objection to adding a station? Or a facility?
A station?
Yeah.
Well, I think several of the garage units should have that as a possible amenity. So that, you know.
All right. Matt, anything from you? Lisa?
I'm good. It'd be foolish not to
Right,
at least.
I believe this is the only item on our agenda today.
Need a motion to continue.
I move to continue this to January 21st at 7:15 PM. Is that the correct date?
That's correct.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do I have a second?
Second.
There you go.
I'll
Do I have a
second
second?
Yeah, you got it.
Second it?
Yep.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Who seconded that? John?
Thank you very
All
much.
right, so
Sorry.
We got another thing to talk about.
Okay.
We got, bear with me.
Oh, you're killing me.
I know, just bear with me. All right,
All right, have a good one.
thank you. All right.
All right. You don't want to do Village of America?
What's that?
You want to do Village while we're here?
We better keep
Come on,
Lisa.
while we're at it.
Lisa, we can knock out Village right now, Village of America.
I got two other things.
Yep.
The first is minutes,
Cool.
and the second is just a quick briefing from Mark Tassoni.
Mark. All right.
Do you want to jump into minutes?
Mark can start right now.
What? What do you want to do?
You want to pass them out?
Sure. You can start with minutes.
Minutes? All right, so we're looking over December 10th minutes.
December 10th minutes.
Good night.
Bye, thank you.
Great job, Tom.
December 10th minutes. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, with you or the
Take a 2-minute,
A 2-minute break?
until we go out of order.
You guys deliberate on this?
What, December 10th?
Deliberations on this? Is
No,
that-
not yet.
Okay.
Okay. This guy can take it better for you.
See, this is my mother's. So we're lucky guys.
Hey.
The trash and recycling center is far away. This is actually, yeah, this, the emergency access comes up a little farther back. There's a plate.
So Vanessa and Preston, we're reviewing the December 10th minutes right now. We'll take a minute to do that,
And then we're going to hear from Mark.
You know, some of these things just require a gestation period. You just do on it, you need to come back.
I wasn't here, but I'm I'm prepared to support you.
Unfortunately,
Wait a second, so we need Max, don't we?
I think you do. I think you only need 3 people. It doesn't have to be people.
Really nothing.
They don't have to specify.
No, it's really just the structures are defined as something that's above ground. So there's really no setback for,
Didn't get a chance.
Now, you think about it.
I know we're trying to do a lot.
Every driveway has to have a 0-foot setback. To the right of way because it's got to connect to it. So, but no, there's no.
But you hung in there,
There's
your
been
volume.
nothing normal about this since 20 years ago.
Bye, you too, thanks.
Happy new primary building.
Max, can you give me some December 10th minutes?
December 10th minutes?
December 10th minutes.
We don't want it.
I need your
Yeah.
approval.
Approved.
All right. That's
I
perfect.
did. It's been ready.
I move to approve the minutes of December 10th, 2015 as printed.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I would second it, but Vanessa accused me of not reading them, so.
Wait, was that a second from Dudley?
Dudley seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions?
Was that a 401? You abstain?
I abstain, I don't
Good.
feel comfortable doing it.
All right.
That's what everyone does.
So as you all know, I've been working on form-based codes for the zoning code, for the zoning bylaw. And I'm going to present that to you at a later meeting. But Mark has been an integral part of that effort. And he and I have worked very hard on this together, and Mark's input has been very valuable. And he and I had a small meeting before this meeting started. And I told Mark that we could reserve a couple of minutes at the conclusion of this meeting so that he can come and talk about our conclusions.
I'd like to ask people to close the door. Clear? Let them know we're still.
Can you guys just clear the podium for a minute so Mark can? Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
No problem.
Take it away, Mark.
Okay. Yes, me and Nate have been having meetings and talking about economic and form designs for the town and stuff like that, and talking about zonings. We are coming up with a team effort to get growth for business in this town. And Nate's been showing his form designs. We got a new economic director here from the Beth Reynolds. And trying to work all together to build this town as it should have been built years ago, to get the regular citizens' taxes back down to a somewhat normal, plausible area. So with Nate's ideas with his form design, and I came up about a month or so ago, asking to change the zoning codes by law. We're coming up with an idea of working, and I want the board input. And I know that once me, Nate, and the interim town manager, Mike Herbert, get all together, I did talk to Mike, we're going to get a meeting going soon.
Okay, good.
And what did you get out of our meeting, and what have you got so far, Nate?
I think that moving forward with a form-based code helps clarify the zoning code. And by adding renderings into the code, it helps set a higher degree of expectation in terms of what we expect. And I think that's what developers would like to see. And also by setting a level of clarity vis-a-vis design, and it's good design, I think that will make people in the community happy as well.
And we were given, and town management has an Anderson report, economic boost and how to get business into this town. And I'm taking notes on it. I'm gonna go forward with it, because that has a great information of the zoning designs and how to bring businesses in their reports. And we're gonna
work all together as an understanding together. I'm here, I talked to Nate, I asked Nate the question, and we talked. Now, to have an understanding for everybody else, I want to have the board ask me, and I can ask the board back. You got any sort of suggestions? 'Cause I'm on the ARA, but I'm doing this separate from them as a citizen that has been involved in this. And I want to just have your boards put input to me, and then questions, whatever, are what we can do together.
So Mark, I have an idea. Maybe if the board emails me with any input they have, I could send it over to you and then we could talk about it. Would that be good?
Talk about it like that, yes.
Good.
And then, the understanding is, we all work together, and as Tony Sherry has left, but his saying is entrusted in me. If you don't plan ahead, you get planned upon. And this is what I'm doing, I'm planning ahead. And the goal is to get this in front of town meeting in the spring. That goal is gonna be in sight. We are working together, we are being together. Me, Nate, and the town manager, Michael Herbert, and the new economic director we're gonna have here. So I thank you for the time, and Nate, stay in touch, board, stay in touch. I'm very open on everything, and I can send over some of the Anderson reports that I gave Nate for notes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, thanks for your effort, too. Appreciate your help.
How far along are you at a point with that you want to bring
I
it
can
to one
talk,
of the meetings?
yeah, I
in
can
the
wait till
future?
the next meeting.
Do we have time? I don't know. Depends on what's on the agenda, right?
It's a jam-packed agenda, but I need to share it with you sooner than later.
Okay.
So, I don't know, you want to start at 7 instead of 7:15, 6:50? Can you do that?
Possibly.
Hmm?
Possibly.
Possibly, okay. All right, we'll talk.
Shooting for 7, or?
Let's shoot for 7.
Okay.
Let's shoot for 7.
Yeah, let's shoot for 7.
I'll give you, we'll have a personal consultation about this.
Nice.
All right.
If she's late and can only come for 7:15, it still works, because the other.
Yeah,
One
we
We're
can
here
make
for the
things look
site
good.
plan.
Show up at 7:15, I'll show up at 7, and
There you go.
you can make me look good.
Yeah, it's not something.
I, for once, I won't be the last person here, so it'll work out
I'll
perfect.
see what I can do for you.
Don't you dare show up at 7.
That's it.
That's it. I believe on the next agenda, we also have to finish discussions around the.
All right, so so at
Needham
some
Bank, yeah.
At some point, we got to talk about a couple things. We have to talk about Needham Bank money. We have to talk about the comprehensive plan committee. That's important. I've had a couple questions from disgruntled residents who live on busy streets, and they feel that sidewalks would be good, and they've asked about money from sidewalk funds. So that's another topic of discussion. And then there's one other project, but we can talk about that another time.
What do you think about getting this new economic development? I forgot the title is.
Director?
I met her. I saw her tonight.
Beth
at the-
Reynolds?
At the ABA before I was at the CBC, before I was at the planning board. But yeah, she was there talking. Maybe we can get her to one of the meetings if you see a light agenda one night, and see if there's anything that she sees might tie into what we're doing, or where the town's headed that might influence.
I'd be happy to
The
touch
form-based
base with her
code.
about that. We have
That's a good idea.
We have hefty agendas in the foreseeable future. We have a new application from Steve Hickey.
Yep.
We have an application from Amoresco for a solar field on High Street? House Street. And there's a development application for houses on Whittemore.
That's the same extension of the kind of failed developer down there.
Yep.
I got one other item for that would be you guys will find very interesting. We've got a few friends of mine in Holliston are outraged at what happened in their town with zoning because they didn't get around to dealing with the marijuana dispensary zoning.
Yeah.
What was it? It was the RMDs, or registered marijuana dispensary, and by our planner and some of the leadership that we jumped onto the bus with and made sure we got ahead of this. They are now facing something where there's two, this might not be 100% accurate, but it's pretty darn close. Some massive growing facilities just got permitted in their town. They're freaking out. And so they of course want to get ahead of this. And I mean, regardless of where you stand on this, they just felt like, how can this happen? And because you can stand on either side of all this, but if you feel like somebody just came in and shoved something down your throat.
But where they located at?
I don't know yet. But they of course wanted to try to learn from us how to institute that. And I said, so maybe they can get a working session. Maybe their PB or somebody would connect with us.
Send them our way.
They're also looking at potentially getting a lot of revenue in the town as a result of this.
Yeah, could be good.
So
Yeah, I mean, if you
the other side
get
of it.
back far away, you know.
But the frustration is, I think, when, also the lesson learned for the planning board is, if you don't stay ahead of stuff, stuff stays ahead of you, and that's kind of what Mark's saying. And I think they felt like they'd have the time, and you don't always have the time. Sometimes you have to get ahead, plan things out, map them out, zone things so that you could say, here's where we want it, here's not where we want it. And I think in general, they would have had to have zoned it somewhere. But the loss of control that they felt was that it came in regardless, wherever it wanted to go, kind of thing. So that's the general. And so I wanted to tell you that because we were duking this out a while ago, and we got ahead of it, and it was a nice little story.
Send them our way.
Yeah.
We're talking about the
Can I
bylaw.
bring up one more thing real quick?
Real quick, Mark, you promise? Real quick?
I promise.
All right, you waited it out.
This brought up for the economic director. Next week, January 14th, is the downtown summit at the community center. She's gonna make her debut there, the economic director. And all the boards are gonna be there. We can talk to her at that time before your next planning board meeting comes in here. It's a downtown summit, and it's gonna be roundtable discussion on ideas. And the economic director, her name is Beth Reynolds, will be her debut to be in front of those committees at that night.
Thanks, Mark. Do you know what day it is, Mark?
January 14th.
January 14th.
That's gonna be on a Wednesday or Thursday, I think.
Thank
Who wrote these notes?
I did.
Awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. I was getting a little frustrated, so I just had to write my thoughts down.
Desperately attempts.
I totally loved it. It's one of my favorite
Great.
memos from him.
Yeah.
Being 10:15 p.m. on 12th night, I move to adjourn.
Nice.
I second. Oh, you second it.
I got you.
John again? John got a second?
Wait. Okay, Preston and John.
Yep.
And what, 10:15?
10:15.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.